Chapter 31. Muspelheim. Yggdrasil. Earth. January of year 2138. Overlord verse. The day of the end of Yggdrasil. The eternal flying garden of Utopia, Avalon. With not much time remaining, Kai blazed through the 14th floor, El Dorado. Its floor guardian, a golden dragon named Aurum Artha Dorado, as named by kindred star. Itsuki and Azusa, both of them had weird naming sense. Kai mused as he took a look around the golden city in the center of a desert, with summoned griffins guarding the desert. Accompanying the griffins were sphinxes, that Kai had bought during an event. They're statues that came to life, upon sensing intruders, similar to gargoyles around the city. And he finally arrived at the last floor, Arrow of Time. Being that his guild base is a world item, Kai had set the last floor in constant state of less than time stop greater than. Modeled after the Beerus's planet, it didn't have any floor guardians. Golems based on his guildmate's avatar and build, guarded the floor. They did not move until any intruder set his foot in the floor. Their bodies crafted using caloric stone and other prismatic ores. With the constant less than time stop greater than effect active in the floor, it made it possibly the most secure place with golems guarding the floor, who remained immune to time stop. Locked out of his guild base, not accessible through normal means, it was a perfect place for Kai to store the world items in his guild. With dozens of world items they had collected, the floor had been dedicated to storing world items. 0 hours 47 minutes and 15 seconds. With still a bit of time left, Kai returned to the 9th floor. Kai looked around the floor and the throne room he had designed and sat on the throne, waiting for Shoko, as he messaged her to hurry up and received a thumbs up. There is still a bit of time, and the condition of bridge was barely fine, Kai pondered, as he thought of a plan. Since there was barely any time left for the server of the game to shut down, Kai thought of trying his luck, one last time, before everything ended. Retrieving fallen Dreki's heart, he invoked GM call. 0 hours 8 minutes and 36 seconds. Kai sat on his throne, awaiting Shoko, as he checked his character sheet refer to auxiliary chapter. Satisfied with his upgrade he smiled, unable to contain his excitement. World items that granted players strength comparable to world enemies, like Fruit of Yggdrasil, Fruit of the Fallen World, Fallen Dreki's Heart, and Ymir's Blood were inherently incompatible with each other. A player could only use one of them according to the rules of Yggdrasil. As the game system alerted the player who had used or consumed Fruit of Yggdrasil, the location of players who had consumed the other world items, in path to become a world enemy, in case they were both in the same world. Though I could have looked for Ymir's Blood, but it wouldn't have been of much use to me, except for preventing other players or beings from taking possession of it. But with this, I have broken a rule of world item to host two world item, essentially becoming a true world enemy, as Kayaba worded it. Kai mused, now, I am truly immune to world items. He checked his inventory, before retrieving his phone and dialing Shoko, for her to not receive the call. Kai had been a bit worried till now, but his emotions flared all of a sudden. Unable to keep his anxiety in check, worried for her safety, Kai kept on messaging her, while he kept an eye on the timer. 0 hours 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Kai got relieved to finally get her reply, after his numerous attempts. He would have logged out to reach her out, if not for his condition. Shoko, I have a bit of a problem, but don't worry. Before she went silent again. Kai, fingers drumming on the armrest of his throne, as he tried calling her repetitively, yet there had been no response. His attention shifted, as he received a message on his mobile, an item that according to its flavor text was fueled by magic, and all he had to was cast a spell, charge its magic array embedded on the device. As, it also came with a restore spell, and was classified as Divinetier item. Shoko, there is a slight problem. Kai stared at the screen, wishing to reply back as soon as possible, to tell her hurry up. Yet, as he read the message, an ominous feeling took root in his heart. As he silently stared at the screen, and the message spree continued. Shoko, it's better to bet on a life in some other world away, than to die. Even after staring at the message, Kai remained quiet. His body had frozen, as he struggled to command his body to move, to get his mind out of the trance. Shoko, I hope you live a happy life, but then to risk your life in this world, where the chances of you surviving are negligible. Shoko, so, take your chance. As he read the texts, his stomach coursed. While the timer continued. 0 hours 0 minutes and 17 seconds. Shoko, I cannot bet our life on a dream. Shoko, I am sorry. Time ticked, waiting for none. Shoko, But I cannot accompany you to this new world, if exists. Shoko. I hope you find a new life there. 0 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Shoko. The animation played, as the screen displayed, Shoko is typing, while the timer ran out. His console had disappeared and so had the game, while Kai found himself in the new world. As he gained sense of his new body. With his phone, clenched tightly. He remained seated without uttering a word, his face expressing emotions that it had failed to before, as his face remained clouded. All his efforts in Yggdrasil had now been rewarded, yet he felt empty, questioning whether his gains offsetted his losses. Time passed, while he remained seated on his throne, before he slammed the phone on the floor, ahead of him. As a demon, he was inherently designed to be cold and calculative, whilst his emotions had been amplified. Albeit, only when they corresponded to any sin. Now, he felt the rage, to a degree, he had never felt before. He doubted if he had ever felt such a loss, grief and anger as he did now. Kai clutched the armrest of the throne, ignoring the phone that lay in pieces distance away, he stood up and yanked, uprooting the throne that had been built into the floor, made from prismatic ores, and threw it across the throne room. His aura dangerously heightened, as the whole floor vibrated from the after effects of his passive skills and the mana that flared corresponding to his emotions. His cry, resonating with his rage, echoed through the throne room. Kai's different auras of 7 levels, bearing down on the guild base, that would have ruptured the guild base had it not been a world item. The pressure of a world enemy, second only to World Devourer, was inflicted on the NPCs of the guild and on the base. Many NPCs struggled to remain upright, as his passive skills and aura affecting floors present in other dimensions within the confines of Avalon. Despite the anger, Kai felt emptiness, questioning if he deserved such fate, had he been destined to cast aside his body, reincarnating, whilst losing what he loved. Tokyo, Neo Japan. Earth, year 2143. Overlord verse. A beautiful woman who appeared to be in her mid-30s, wearing a business suit, stepped out of a limousine, while the driver held it open for her. She wore a mask, as the dark clouds blotted the afternoon sky. Walking across the cement road, she came to a stop in front of a gate, what appeared to be a school. School had just let out. Children spilled through the gate in unruly waves, racing toward cars, guardians. While she patiently waited by the gate. When the rush of children thinned, a man in a charcoal suit approached and stood beside her. I see you have come, Ryuga, the woman said without turning. He nodded before replying. Can't afford to offend my princess, now can I? A faint smile touched her eyes. I suppose that's how it is. Ryuga glanced up at the school, time's funny. It wasn't long ago, when you and Kai used to attend this school, as did I. He muttered, feeling nostalgic, a faint pain in his eyes. The things that happened, yet you look the same as before, Shoko. He muttered, looking at the crowd. Before she could answer, grabbing their attention were 2 overlapped voices. Mom. Dad. 2 girls broke from the crowd of students, belling toward Ryuga and Shoko. The taller of the 2 girls, beamed as she wrapped her arms around the woman's waist. While the younger launched herself at Ryuga's arms, dangling. Taking a look at her surrounding, the taller girl leaned back, tilting her head politely toward the man. Hello, Uncle Ryuga, she muttered. Ryuga chuckled, his hand gently ruffling her hair. Still as polite as ever, aren't you, Yukino? You've grown taller since last time. While the younger girl, who had been dangling off Ryuga's arm, looked up at Shoko, with a grin. Hi, Aunt Shoko, she announced. Shoko smiled beneath her mask, crouching slightly to meet her niece's gaze. You're the same as ever, Yui. Still full of energy. Meanwhile, Yui, the younger girl, looked up at Shoko with gleaming eyes. Aunt. Dad said I can eat 5 ice creams today. You and Yukino should join us, she muttered, before continuing. Mom said she will also be eating. Shoko arched a brow, amused beneath the mask. Oh. Is that so, Yui? Ryuga feigned innocence, shrugging with a helpless grin. Well, you know how she negotiates. She's worse than any corporate deal I've had this week. I can't bear to upset my little princess. Shoko chuckled at his response. Well, I am sure Kanade must be having trouble managing you both. Ryuga sighed, patting Yui's head. It's fine. The 4 of them stood there for a brief moment, letting the breeze blow through the silence. The world had changed so much, yet somehow this scene felt nostalgic to Ryuga. It reminded him of the past, back when Kai had indulged him, fulfilling his wishes. Ryuga smiled, at the nostalgic feeling, and replied. Well, it's not every day I get to meet my niece. Besides, his voice lowered, almost lost in the breeze. It's good to be a bit indulging. Shoko nodded, brushing Yui's hair back gently before glancing towards Yukino, who looked up at her innocently. Yes. Let's enjoy the small things, while we still can. Ryuga nodded, picking up Yui. So, can I hope to expect you too, this evening? He muttered, looking over to Yukino, who looked up at her mother, expectantly. Fine, I'll let you enjoy it. Shoko muttered, unable to bear her daughter's twinkling eyes. Well, I'll inform Kanade of your addition. Ryuga muttered, before glancing at his watch. It's time, I'll take my leave. He muttered, looking over at Shoko, as he brushed Yukino's hair. I'll be waiting for you, Yukino. Exchanging their farewell, the two girls of nearly same age, parted ways, each going with their parent. While Shoko held her daughter's hand, as they both walked toward their car. When Yukino muttered, with Shoko raising her eyebrow at her daughter's question. Mom, remember Yui had showed me the wall of fame at Grandpa's place. And we were talking about it during our self-defense class today. Is it true that Papa never lost in anything and he even beat you in everything? She muttered with a puzzled look. Shoko sighed at her daughter's question. Well, it is true that beat me, but there were times when I beat him as well. She muttered, a bit pride swelling up inside her, with her remembering the times when she sent him to respawn. In response to her mother's answer, Yukino tilted her head, and mused, but, in every image that you were there in the Wall of Fame, you were either second or third. Well, that is his Wall of Fame, so obviously, you wouldn't find his loses there, would you? But Grandpa and Uncle Ryuga said that Papa never lost in anything. Yukino muttered. Causing Shoko to groan, when she resorted to pull the record of all her wins. Well, I have beat him in a fight, multiple times. Her answer had caught the attention of her daughter, as Yukino looked at her with shining eyes. Being the daughter of Kai Kurenai, she held his legacy, at least that's what her teachers told her. Expecting great things from her, while she wondered about her mother, who raised her. As she always appeared to be overshadowed by her father. Yukino was proud of her father's legacy and the expectations teachers had with her, the respect she earned with her hard work following her father's steps. As they acknowledged her genuineness and took her seriously and did not outright dismiss her. So, to hear her father to have lost, she couldn't believe it, but for it to have been her mother. It amazed her. After all, despite her practice, she had lost to her cousin, Yui, in judo. So, if her perfect father could lose, there must be a way that her mother could teach her, so that she could gain the advantage in the next match. Seated inside the car, Shoko looked at her daughter, who looked at her with high expectations. So, in which martial arts did you beat Papa? Yukino muttered. Releasing a sigh, Shoko admitted to the truth, unwilling to lie to her daughter. It was in a game, where I have beat him multiple times. The answer wasn't what she was expecting, but was also intrigued by the information she gained. Papa lost in a game. She mused. Seeing the downcast look of her daughter, gazing at her daughter, who from her perspective was losing admiration and respect her daughter had for her, she gritted her teeth, and finally muttered. You know, there was this one time when I did defeat him in real life. And he couldn't even move and didn't even have strength left to surrender. He stood frozen in front of me, as I yanked him. Shoko proudly declared her victory story to her daughter, who listening to the incident had gained hope. Really? And, why would I lie to my own daughter? Muttered Shoko, in response. Then how did you did it? Questioned her daughter, as Shoko proudly declared, it was by using my special technique and exploiting his weakness. Yukino's eye sparkled, hearing about this special technique, urgency filled her. As she requested her mother to teach her. Can you please teach me this technique, please mom? As Shoko turned her attention to the window, muttering, it is too soon for you to learn it. With Yukino requesting to be taught the technique, all the way to their home, albeit Shoko reached an agreement to teach her after she is ready. Much to Yukino's disappointment, Shoko would be the one to decide when she was ready for the technique. Left with no other choice, Yukino promised to continue her training, while she would concentrate in other fields, till her mother taught her that technique, when she would beat Yui. As she also wondered about this weakness of her father. Oh, this chapter marks the end of Volume 1 and all going on hiatus, till first week of August. With this mass update, I've uploaded 31 chapters. Until next time, and please do drop a review. I'll try to reply and it would serve as a good benchmark for my FIC, for me to take feedback on and for the improvisation I can make in the Volume 2 of this FIC. Volume 2 will take place in New World. Chapter 32. Unknown Lands. Deep inside the Savage Hills. New World. Overlord verse. The eastern region of the continent was a never-ending layout of hills and sinkholes, encompassed by barren ridges. The wasteland stretched into the distance. Venturing into this region was akin to suicide for humans, elves, and dwarves. The region was home to various vicious demihuman races, each more savage than the last. Inside the hilly terrain, bordering the barren hills filled with sinkholes to the north, the sound of boots slamming against the earth echoed. Did we manage to lose them? A voice called out from within the small group of humans. Despite the hoarse, worn-out voice questioning their situation, the humans ran along the desolate path. They had fled from the forest situated south of the hilly region. They had slain the demihumans they encountered, led by a human in full silver armor wielding a spear. His movements were odd, as if he were struggling, each swing of his sword marked by great pain. He was the great Gron-On of King Elshan, a god king to him. He had inherited a fragment of his prowess as a level 100 player. Though it angered him to no end that the weak, those who lived at the mercy of the strong and survived only because of his great-grandfather's actions, had labeled them greedy and bestowed upon them the moniker, 8 Greed Kings. Those humans failed to understand the favor his grandfather had bestowed upon them, eliminating the Dragon Lords and the subsequent persecution of demihumans and heteromorphs who had once threatened to drive humanity to extinction. The prosperous regime that followed and the way the human species thrived under their rule was magnificent. To him, it was the golden era of humanity, and he always cursed his fate to be born too late. So, after the fall of the 8 god kings, he had ventured to meet Decem Hogan, a fellow descendant. It had been his wish to revive their legacy for as long as he could remember, and he had hoped to start by bringing Arawentiu under his control. But that wish was shattered upon discovering that the Platinum Dragon Lord had already laid claim to their legacy. Hit by reality, he was left helpless, as the realization dawned that the dream which once seemed within reach had actually been far beyond his grasp. Despite the odds stacked against him, he did not wish to give up and had set out to find the other descendants of the 8 god kings, to find allies who would join him in his noble cause. He had traveled far and wide in his search, and had been overjoyed upon learning of the son of one of the 8 god kings, King Hogan. The enmity that had existed among the 8 greed kings in their final moments was overlooked by him. With high hopes, he went to meet Decem Hogan, who had established a nation for elves, only to be looked down upon. Decem Hogan's indifference, paired with his disrespect toward his great-grandfather, had prompted him to raise his blade against the elf king, and for the son of King Hogan to summon his pet, a creature gifted by his father, Behemoth, named after a famous raid boss back in Yggdrasil. The fight had nearly destroyed the section of the royal castle, where the Behemoth had managed to inflict a fatal injury on Alashar, the great Gron-On of King Elshan. He had run short on health potions and mana from all the healing magic he had cast on himself, while his entourage was busy parrying the elven army. They were talented warriors and casters, handpicked by Alashar for his dream. The cream of the crop, each of them trained by his family while living in seclusion, in fear of other descendants and the remaining dragon lords. A sentiment not shared by Alashar, as he had long surpassed the limits of humanity and become what the theocracy termed a godkin. Alashar lost many of his men in the fight, a loss he deeply regretted. Finding warriors and casters as skilled as them was an arduous task. By the sacrifice of his servants and comrades, he and a few remaining followers managed to flee the Elven Kingdom. They ran through the Abelian Hills, entering demi-human territory. Their decision might have been akin to suicide had they not been led by a godkin and supported by warriors who bordered the realm of heroes. Without the corpses of his fallen, it was impossible for him, or any other mortal, to resurrect them. Resurrection without a corpse was a feat only achievable by the 8 god kings. They flew using their enhanced bodies, supported by buffs cast by their comrades. They flew until their mana ran dry, then ran until their legs gave out. The dominating presence of the Behemoth, the Elf King's pet, had etched a deep fear into their hearts. They rested only after venturing deep into the Abelian Hills, long after sunset. Coming to a stop beside a river that flowed along the hills, they checked their surroundings and eliminated the nearby demi-humans. Settling down in the region, they rested, using what remained of their mana to heal themselves and one another. It was quite humiliating, muttered one of them, prompting the others to glare at him, while Alashar remained seated. He stared at the beautiful stars above, his back resting against a tree. Above him lay a box of otherworldly jewels that was rightfully his to claim, but a few thieves now hovered over his treasures. The sight infuriated him, though he ignored the mutterings of his servants and the comrades he had found along the way. Similarly, on the other side of the group, looking over at the weary and disheartened party of men, a boy who appeared no older than 17 sighed. Percus, come help me fish. The voice pulled the young boy out of his daydream. Yes, Sir Serious, he replied with a groan. With a nod in return, the boy stood up. Casting one last glance at the broken men sprawled across the land, he followed the man, who appeared to be in his 30s, toward the riverside. I wonder how that behemoth they spoke about looked, the young boy mused as he stabbed a makeshift wooden spear into the river. Percus was an aspiring magic caster who was said to be quite talented, at least according to his village chief, who had first recognized his gift. He was told he possessed the talent to learn any spell taught to him. Percus had grown up in a small village south of the Ivernia kingdom. Born in the boonies, he was lucky to have even had a village chief who was a shaman, and he remained deeply grateful to him for discovering his talent and for the advice he had given. So, when Alisher and his entourage stopped by their village, Percus had been over the moon at the chance to express his wish to join them on their journey, to explore the world and learn more about magic. Magic had always been his focus, hand in hand with his dream of traveling the wide world. To Percus, magic was the creation of the gods, a divine gift granted to a blessed few. He had always envied those who were raised in environments where magic could be studied freely, surrounded by the privilege to learn and wield it. After all, to the people of his village, magic that could summon lightning, fire, water, or earth was the stuff of legends. All he and his friends had ever seen growing up was the summoning magic of the village chief, who could call upon the power of a bull onto himself, to strengthen his body. So, the magic used by Alisher's companions and servants had left Percus awestruck. If this behemoth managed to chase away Sir Serious, Lord Marcus, Lord Montan, and casters like Lord Cahufer, Lady Costalia, and Sir Mercilin, he mused, then it must have been incredibly powerful. But what about the elf king who summoned it? Shouldn't he be incredibly powerful magic caster, the likes of no one have seen? The boy wondered as he fished for dinner alongside the man named Serious. Percus had been left with his other companions, those who had joined Alisher's journey with promising potential, outside the royal capital. Not all of them had been granted access to the capital, let alone the royal palace. Even at the palace gates, most were denied entry, much less permitted an audience with the elf king. Alas, Percus was the last of those promising young talents to survive and escape from the elf kingdom. Percus was lost in thought, wondering about the possibility of learning the magic used by the elf king. He thought of ways he might convince the elf king to teach him, and, by extension, leave Alisher's side to venture out and spread his wings. The casters who served and accompanied Alisher were great. They are the best casters humanity has ever produced, with Lady Costalia able to cast magic up to the 5th tier. I probably won't find others as capable as them. But being here, I haven't learned any new spells, much less grown stronger. Their pride and envy prompt them to gatekeep their powerful spells, and they take days just to prepare to teach me their useless ones, he mused, cursing the slow pace of his growth. Despite all their supposed preparation, he learned most of the spells they taught him within hours. Though many of the spells proved difficult due to his limited mana capacity. Sometimes it makes me wonder if they're nitpicking the ones that consume the most mana. Percus respected Alisher and idolized him as the strongest mortal, comparable only to the Dragon Lords, the 6 great gods, or the 8 Greed Kings, who were immortal. So, when he learned that Lord Alisher was a descendant of the 8 Greed Kings, he had been too shocked to speak, remaining dumbstruck for days. Growing up in a faraway village that treated those tales as mere stories and fantasies, it had been difficult to process. Get a few more before you make your way back, muttered Serious. I'll take these to the camp and have them start frying them, he added as he made his way to their makeshift campsite. Pulling Percus from his contemplation. Despite being a magic caster, he had often been tasked with physical duties like setting up the campfire, procuring food, and various other grunt work. Given his status, and living among people who could be counted among the strongest humanity had ever produced, a lot of the menial work that sustained the group fell on his and his companions' shoulders, especially those who had joined under circumstances similar to his. Percus had grown used to such tasks, having grown up in a village, and hadn't given it much thought. Compared to the chance to learn magic, explore the world, and accompany potential legendary figures of the future, the grunt work was a small price to pay. He stabbed his makeshift spear into the river when he suddenly felt a wave of magic. It was minuscule, barely more than a breeze, but the spatial fluctuation that followed it was no secret. Perkus quickly scanned his surroundings, raising his wooden spear and preparing to cast teleportation magic to regroup with his companions. He glanced around again, noting how his companions, busy preparing dinner and setting up camp for the night, had failed to detect the disturbance. Perkus looked around and found the place eerily quiet, devoid of all sound. The chirps of insects had suddenly stopped, and he noticed no animals in his immediate surroundings. It was then that he felt a sudden burst of violent, raw mana that sent a shiver down his spine, an alien and otherworldly mana, primordial in nature, that seemed to threaten the balance of the world itself and the end of everything with it. The mana felt both native and foreign to the world, aboriginal, yet alien, but one thing was certain, he could feel its raw, chaotic power. As it suffocated him, threatening to devour his whole existence, by merely its presence. When he looked up, he saw a tear in the sky, a literal tear through the heavens. He was left speechless, unable to fully comprehend the situation. He understood the workings of teleportation magic, which allowed a caster to move through space. So, the sight of a tear in the sky brought to mind memories of when he first learned the lesser teleportation spell, Dimensional Move. A new thought took root: was this a tear through space itself? He knew of no magic capable of such a feat, nor had he ever heard of one. The disturbance had drawn Alisher's attention, prompting him to appear beside Perkus before the others could register the burst of primordial energy. Though the tear had closed, both Perkus and Alisher remained rooted to the spot. The magic had been so intense, so foreign, it felt as if it would erase their existence the closer they got to it. It wasn't long before the mana and the unknown energy disappeared. Perkus hadn't even noticed Alisher's presence beside him and remained frozen in place, staring at the sky that had now patched itself up. So when he finally regained his courage and looked toward the camp, he spotted Alisher. Just seeing him there calmed his soul and brought a reassuring sense of stability, despite the situation. Perkus opened his mouth to speak, only to pause as he noticed Alisher staring in awe at something on the other side. Seeing his expression, the words caught in Perkus's throat. He turned to follow Alisher's gaze, and was left speechless at the divine sight across from them. Noticing the disturbance, the others had also arrived. Costalia, the genius magic caster of their group, was the first to approach, muttering her concern. But when her eyes met Perkus's and followed the direction of his pointing hand, she too was struck dumb by the impossibility before them. The same could be said for the rest of the group. Across the river stood a divine structure, a giant pair of golden doors, inscribed with intrusive markings and runes, embedded with brilliant gemstones. The doors stood tall, as if meant for dragons or giants, and their majestic exterior gave the impression that whatever lay beyond them was a realm fit only for gods. Just the details inscribed on the door surpassed anything he had laid his eyes on, even the Arowentiu failed in comparison to the divine aura it emitted. As if it was a abode to the creator of gods. Chapter 33. Abelian Hills. New World. Overlord verse. Staring at the giant pair of doors, Perkus remained rooted in place, uneasy about the entity responsible for them. When he suddenly heard a burst of laughter from the side, he turned skeptically, wondering what could have caused it. While everyone else remained wary of the massive doors, barely hidden, obscured only by a giant tree on the other side of the river, Alisher burst out laughing, confounding the group. As expected of the world, he muttered loudly before advancing toward the doors. His words raised doubts among the others, but as the strongest among them and their leader, they followed, though some kept their distance. To Perkus, it felt like one overwhelming event after another, and he couldn't help but question the sanity of their leader after everything that had happened since their encounter with the Elf King. Trailing behind the others, Perkus moved forward with the group toward the doors. Flying across the river, they soon arrived before the towering golden gates, Alisher at the front, Perkus at the back. As Alisher stepped forward and attempted to push open the doors, they swung open on their own, with no intervention from those present, startling the group. Before them stretched a vast expanse of never-ending darkness, with distant star clusters gleaming like lanterns scattered through a void. The door created an illusion, one that made it seem as though it held the stars and heavens within. To Alisher, it looked like a bridge to the skies that had always remained just out of reach, now promising power, feeding the delusion born from his first defeat at the hands of Decem. As expected of my great-grandfather, to grant me this opportunity, he spoke aloud, spreading his arms wide as if to claim the jewels that dotted the skies. The door had appeared at the very moment of his dilemma, when he had questioned his existence and begged the God King for guidance, to show him the path to have his vengeance against Decem for dishonoring his family. His great-grandfather, who had once slain gods and dragon lords alike. The appearance of the door had become his final thread tethering him to reality after his first crushing defeat, when all hope of vengeance against that lowly elf had seemed lost. Like Decem, Alisher had grown up believing that humans were the chosen race and that all others were beneath them. Alisher raised his arm, silencing the murmurs among the group, and declared, "My loyal followers and comrades, my great-grandfather, King Elshin, has not forsaken us, even after returning to his divine abode. He has now opened the doors to his divine realm, to welcome his chosen warriors." His words stirred quiet doubt among the group, but none dared voice their concerns. To them, the spectacle before them was a miracle of the gods. The very thought of danger had been cast aside, drowned beneath the still silence and the breathtaking beauty of the cosmos unfolding through the open doors. Paired with lack of any enemies emerging from the door, prompted them to reconsider their options. After all, who other than the gods themselves could have enacted a structure as grandiose as the door? As for Decem, he was strong, yes, but still far beneath the gods, and thus they dismissed other possible explanations. Traveling alongside Alisher, and with most of them trained by the descendant family of King Elshin, they had grown up on tales of the god king who had slain mighty dragons and gods to liberate humanity. To magic casters, the 8 god kings were a step above the gods who had fallen in battle against the 8 greed kings, for it had been the 8 who introduced magic to the weak, creating a path for humans to defend themselves. With the barely disguised divine radiance the door emitted, Alisher's speech finally made sense to them. Nodding in agreement, they raised their weapons high and marched alongside him, each filled with urgency to claim the divine weapons and blessings of King Elshin. But Purkis stood at the rear, unable to match their zeal. He was still a relatively new member, and unlike the others, was not a fanatic. After the sobering reality of their encounter with the Elf King, he had grown more cautious. More importantly, unlike the rest, he had felt the initial pulse of magic. It was chaotic and primal, sending chills down his spine. Purkis had once visited the abode of the 8 greed kings, under the guise of a traveler, to gather information for Alisher. He had been there, and he had felt the magic of that ancient city. He was certain of it. Though he possessed no concrete proof for his suspicion, his instincts screamed at him. The magic responsible for the miracle of the door felt eerily similar to the presence he had sensed from the Dragon Lord who had laid claim to Arawentiu, from a distance. Born with a rare sensitivity to magic and energy, and gifted with a talent for learning spells, Purkis trusted his senses. And what he had felt from the Dragon Lord residing in the city, from the outer rim of that city felt similar to what he now felt here. Though, the power of the Dragon Lord felt quite inferior to the magic he witnessed. Though the power and intensity were beyond comparison. If the magic of that Platinum Dragon Lord had been akin to a grain of sand, Purkis mused, then the magic that brought forth this door is vaster than the world itself. It was far more chaotic and primordial, as if it held the very might to deny the existence of everything within this region. Purkis remained rooted in place, lost in thought, when Sarius, who had been the last among the men to leave, turned back one final time. "Come on," he urged. "Let's not miss the reward for our effort and loyalty." And then he, too, disappeared through the doors. Purkis now stood alone in the silent tranquility of the night, deep within the forest, as no sound passed through the golden gateway. Still unmoving, he stared at the doorway, fear settling in his bones, fear not of monsters or armies, but of the thing or being that had created such a divine construct. Purkis was relieved, in part, that no enemies had poured through to assail them. Yet even in their absence, uncertainty gripped him. Purkis had not voiced his doubts earlier, afraid of being branded a heretic or traitor. So he had remained quiet, watching as the others gave themselves willingly to what they believed was divine providence. Purkis desired to peer into the abyss of magic, to climb the rungs of arcane mastery and witness the heights only legends had seen, but not at the cost of his life. Not if the price was blindly stepping into a miracle that he felt reeked of something older, darker, and far more dangerous than even the gods he revered. When he didn't hear any sound from those who had entered the door, he walked up to it, his steps fearful of the doom that could have befallen his comrades. With the silence of the surroundings and no other living being in sight, his mind went into overdrive, imagining disastrous scenarios. His fear fed him possibilities, each more catastrophic than the last, where his comrades might have met their end. Standing before the door, he gazed at the never-ending cosmos within, glittering with stars and celestial creations. He truly felt insignificant standing there, and when he looked around, taking his eyes off the door, he found himself all alone in the forest. This door is definitely trouble, and it would be stupid of me to sacrifice my life at this point. He mused, staring at the doorframe and the runes that lined it. Whether it's the 8 greed kings or the 6 great gods, they're all the same. As long as I can get stronger, it shouldn't matter who I follow. He rested his hand on the doorframe, feeling the intricate designs and the otherworldly material used to build it. Then he shook his head, having decided to risk his chances, and cast a summoning spell. Less than summon angel third tier greater than. Unlike them, he wasn't a fanatic and didn't have the luxury of considering the chances of offending the being beyond the door. It was a life or death situation anyway for him. He could have escaped, but the idea of abandoning his comrades left a bitter taste in his mouth after everything they had done for him. Though prideful and egotistical, they still care for me and helped me learn magic. This is the least I can do for them, he mused. Archangel Flame, advance through the door and relay the situation to me, he commanded the angel. Hopefully the god on the other side doesn't take offense to this action of mine and forgives me for being a puny human. But I wonder if this angel serves the same god responsible for this gate, considering how close I summoned it to the door, he mused, watching the angel enter. He stood frozen as he noticed the connection vanish. As soon as the angel crossed the threshold, he felt the bond sever, or rather, it felt as if the angel had been erased from existence. The moment he realized it, he cast less than dimensional move greater than and created distance between himself and the door. All his hopefulness was dashed as he speculated on the probable death of his comrades. Yet, he didn't rule out the possibility that they, or the summon, had survived. What if they're still alive? He muttered under his breath, trying to be optimistic, eyeing the door from afar. What if the situation on the other side isn't completely hopeless, and is just isolated from the outside, with it being the domain of a god? Linking the working of the god's domain similar to wards used to block teleportation or other type of space magic. Perkus stood eyeing the door, torn between the decision to enter or retreat. He had a feeling that the power beyond the door far surpassed that of the Dragon Lords, the 8 greed kings, or even the 6 great gods. He had no evidence to support his theory, but his gut, shaped by sensing the auras and energies of many powerful beings he met, told a different story. Even the 6 great gods and the 8 greed kings fell before this world, so the allure of a power that could potentially grant unimaginable strength is appealing. I just have a hunch, a strong gut feeling, he mused. Whatever it was that created this door, and the magic that brought it forth, possesses the power to grant any wish, true, boundless power. Not even the 8 greed kings or the 6 great gods were shown capable of such a feat, he muttered, staring hard at the door, unable to make up his mind. Maybe it's my supposed talent that's whispering to me about the magic responsible for this door and to dive inside, and yet. Perkus raised his foot to step forward but couldn't gather the courage, and instead took a step back. The omnipotent god, the creator of the world. He muttered, recalling the tales his village chief used to speak about. In the East, there's a tribe of humans who worship a god said to be present everywhere and all-knowing. Though, most of them were killed off by the beastmen, if I remember correctly. They used to sacrifice living beings every full moon, if I remember it right. Perkus pondered the possible relation between the door and the extinct tribe. Didn't they used to throw their sacrifices into a cave where a door supposedly led to the abode of their god? He wondered, trying to make sense of the situation. Sweat trickled down his forehead as he wished it was just his paranoia. I am too weak to be invading the domain of a god, he mused, only to be snapped out of his thoughts when the golden door closed on its own. Despite the abyss of magic he had so desperately longed for, now possibly lying just beyond his reach, brought forth by a phenomenon only possible through divine means, he still feared taking a step forward, fearing it would be his end. Mourning his comrades, he cast less than fly greater than and took to the skies. I need more power. He muttered, silently cursing his powerlessness and cowardice to follow his comrades. Perkus took one last look at the closed doors before flying off toward the east of the Abelian Hills, toward the empire adjacent to the theocracy. With his history with theocracy, he steered clear of them. On his journey, hiding from the prominent forces, the desire to gain power and study the door remained a wistful dream. He failed to find the door again, except for the Griff, a beastman species with the characteristics of both eagle and man. With dark dwarves aiding them, he had been chased out of the forest before he could spot the door. Even after numerous attempts over decades, he failed to find the door again, despite fooling the Griff and the dark dwarves. Yet on his journey, he inspired many young magic casters. One particularly promising mage remained memorable to him, a young, talented mage from Belmus village. Perkus's life had remained stagnant since the day he encountered the door. He eventually grew old and fell battling a demon god, before he lost all his belongings to the demon god. Even in his final moments, he regretted not entering the door, which he had long speculated was the abode of an all-powerful god capable of granting any wish, to those who served him. Sighing for the umpteenth time as she gazed at the book, a short undead woman shook her head and closed it. Chapter 34. Re-Estais Kingdom. New World. Overlord verse. Anyway, what's so special about that book, Evely, that you carry it with you everywhere? A tall and bulky woman asked her short companion, known as Evely. Ah. A musclehead like you couldn't possibly understand the importance of this old book. It belonged to a powerful magic caster and records his journey, Evely muttered, earning a smile from her companions as the bulky woman slapped her back in humor. Their comical exchange caused the twins, who sat across from the short, masked woman and the giant woman named Gargan, to stare in amazement, along with the woman in the floral long dress who sat beside them inside the carriage. Getting a strong pat on her back, Evely glared at the woman named Gargan, who laughed at her party member. Then their captain, the leader of the Blue Roses, an adamantite adventurer party based in the Re-Estais kingdom, intervened to stop the bickering among her team. We are meeting Princess Renner. Please behave yourselves in Her Highness's presence. Well, she's just another employer, it really shouldn't matter, muttered Evely, earning a laugh from Gargan as she replied, well, isn't our leader and the princess too worried about this little group causing problems in the capital? To us they are petty thieves, but I'm sure the princess thinks otherwise, muttered one of the twins, Tina, while her other twin remained quiet. It wouldn't have become a problem if it weren't for those idiot nobles, muttered Lachias, tightening her fist in spite of her anger toward the corrupt nobles. The conversation between the Blue Roses continued as their carriage made its way through the streets of Re-Estais' capital, heading toward the royal castle. Meanwhile, similar to Evely, an old man remained seated at his table inside a tall tower within the empire, adjacent to the Re-Estais kingdom. He sat staring at the book atop the table, having received the grimoire from his first master, the wandering magic caster who had stopped by his village during his childhood, helped him identify his talent, and set him on the path to become a wizard. Though the magic caster hadn't stayed in the village for long, he had gifted him a copy of his grimoire, which contained accounts of his adventures. Though he had layered it with magic locks to make it difficult for me to open. And by following his trajectory, the place should have been close to the Re-Estais kingdom. He sighed, having searched for the place mentioned in the book to no avail, even after managing to unlock it through decades of hard work. The powerful vampire that recently appeared near Rantel is interesting. I should have it investigated. He mused, as he pleaded to the supposed god mentioned by his master in the grimoire. Unlike his old master, he was ready to lay down his life, if it was at all possible, to get a glimpse at the abyss of magic. With the vampire, providing him with a lead, that could possibly help him unveil the secret to the powerful undead he had recently captured. After being denied entry to Arawentiu, he felt a strong bond with his old master. But presented with a new path, he had exhausted every resource to find the door that led to the home of the all-powerful and omnipotent god and get his wish granted. Alas, he had failed in his quest repeatedly. Somewhere else, in the domain beyond the door. A soundless space greeted them, a dimension suspended in infinite darkness and stillness. Alisher's foot struck the unfamiliar surface. There was no texture, no echo. Just void beneath his step. He felt an unnatural stillness, as if time itself refused to flow. What is this place? He thought, instinctively reaching for the hilt of his spear. The air didn't move. As he felt the absence of air, yet something inside him shuddered. To his side, he sensed something immense. Turning slowly, his breath hitched. A massive dragon, its red scales mottled with soot, lay sprawled like a felled mountain. Its eyes were closed, the eyelids alone taller than any walls laid across major cities to protect against monster invasion. He was frightened by it, but upon closer, he found it dead, relieving him of the outcome, yet he shuddered at the being responsible for its demise. The awe gripped him briefly, before a sharp pang of dread stabbed through his chest. My comrades. He spun around, and his blood froze. They were scattered like discarded dolls, all of them, his comrades, brave and strong, laying motionless on the glassy surface of the void. No wounds marked their exterior. Their eyes were open, frozen wide, expressions full of hope and aspirations. They appeared as if frozen in time. He looked around, trying to find the golden door they had stepped through, but the space was closed, as if it had never existed. Then, he looked down at his hands, specifically, at the two rings. They were heirlooms passed down his family, they had inherited from his great-grandfather's treasury along with the silver spear and full-body armor. As for the rings, one granted a resurrection upon death, while the other was embedded with two gems. One gem let him be immune to instant death spells, while the other rendered him immune to time-stop magic. Are these rings the reason I'm still moving? Was this some kind of time-stop magic? He thought, a cold realization dawning upon him. He was witnessing the magic he had only ever heard about in tales passed down through his family. Then, he felt it. A subtle dissolution. His fingers were flickering at the edges. His form, growing lighter. Less defined. As though his body were slowly unraveling into threads of soul and substance. He felt his soul and the essence that made his existence disintegrate before him. A process that had begun the moment he had stepped foot inside the dimension, as he looked over at his comrades, who suffered the same fate as him, despite being stuck in time. He watched his comrades again, and saw it clearly this time. They too were breaking down. It was when he noticed an angel to appear through swirl of darkness, through the cluster for it disintegrate before it could reach his side. Despair crushed him, and for the first time in his life, he cursed his bloodline. Cursed his fate. As even the all-powerful ring that protected him against instant death, and the ring that was supposed to resurrect him, met with the same fate as him. Drawing upon the conclusion, making him finally realize the place belonged to a power that even surpassed the 8 godkings. Making him wonder if even the dragon that lay dead was possibly stronger than the 8 godkings, to remain unaffected by the power of the place even in death. Back at the forest, the door still stood tall, unmoved and unaffected by everything. As Perkus departed, a young, talented Griff, who had overheard the conversation and sensed the disturbance arrived before the door. Upon laying eyes on the divine structure, the young Griff fell to his knees, prostrating himself before the door. The Griff race was not particularly strong, but their numbers were few, barely in the upper 2 digits. When the other Griff heard the tale from the young one, many remained skeptical. But all doubt vanished the moment they saw the door for themselves. Just being near it seemed to mend their wounds. Its divine aura poured out gently, like warmth from a sacred hearth, healing injuries simply by proximity. Soon, the Griff were not alone. Dark dwarves followed. Unlike the dwarves of the Azerlija Mountains, the Dark Kin had long resisted abandoning their ancient culture. Where others moved towards embracing the convenience of the tiered magic system, these dark dwarves remained fixated on rune craft. And when they found the door, runes etched into its frame, layered in patterns beyond anything they recognized, they were enthralled. With the immense power they felt from the runes, their reverence turned into alliance. The Griff, blessed by the door's divine energy, accepted the weapons and armor the dwarves forged. Not long after, the turtle tribe of beastmen arrived, beings once on the brink of extinction, persecuted by stronger demihuman tribes. Like the Griff, they had considered abandoning the region entirely. Instead, they found sanctuary at the door. They, too, witnessed miracles. Their life centered around the divine door, as they prayed and worshipped it, all in hopes of laying their eyes on the supreme God, get a glimpse on the divine figure of the all-powerful God. And the door didn't turn away anyone who seeks sanctuary within its presence. And then came the goat beastmen, practitioners of magic, wandering hermits in the hills. When they encountered the door and witnessed its power, they bowed low and pledged themselves. The 4 races forged an alliance. Griff guarded the north. Dark dwarves took the south. The turtle tribe stood sentinel to the west. And the goat beastmen defended the east. They called it a temple, the physical manifestation of the path that led to abode of their god. A divine structure worthy of worship. And in time, their faith deepened. Together, the dwarves and goat beastmen shaped the land around it, building an artificial hill to conceal the door from sight. Layer upon layer of protective runes, wards, and magical defenses were laid with painstaking care. Each clan pledged their lives to the divine structure, believing that one day, when the door finally opened, they would be allowed to offer their allegiance directly to their god. They protected the temple with secrecy. Other demihuman tribes, sensing something powerful in the region, grew suspicious. But were painstakingly deflected from the region as they used powerful wards with runes to create a powerful illusion and mist to disrupt all those who tried to invade their god's abode. With the dark dwarves plotting with the goat beastmen, they intensified the conflict with the neighboring kingdom barely to distract the demihuman tribes of the Abelian Hills and were successful in their scheme. While the 4-clan alliance stood strong, with their devotion. sacrificing themselves, all in hopes one day meeting their god. As the alliance stood strong, they fought off other tribe. They plotted and silently fought amongst themselves to lay claim over the door, as they competed to please their god, awaiting the day the door would be opened. Yet despite all their hopes, the eternal flying garden of Utopia, Avalon had only partially arrived to the New World. Alas, its main castle had yet to descent the New World. Still, the door remained unmoved and unaffected by all. It stood nestled within the Abelian Hills, protected by 4 races whose very survival had been ensured by its arrival. They watched and waited for the promised day. A future that would begin to unfold the moment Kai and his guild arrived in the New World. Anne, what do you think about the start of this second volume? And as promised, I have started with the second volume of this FIC by second week of August. As always, do drop a comment to relay your opinion about this chapter, where I could draw upon those suggestions to improvise my next chapters. Also, if you can, drop a review. It can probably help boost the reach of this FIC. Anyway, I hope you share your thoughts in the comments section. Chapter 35. Abelian Hills. New World, Present Time. Overlord verse. The Temple of the Supreme Lord, the Omnipotent God. More than 2 centuries had passed since the Golden Doors, the gate to the eternal flying garden of Utopia, Avalon, had descended to the New World. The new religion, centered around the supposed supreme god residing beyond the Golden Door, had made waves among the 4-clan alliance of the Abelian Hills. As their devotion ran deep, on extreme levels for few of them. The 4-clan alliance, centered around the Griff, Dark Dwarves, Turtle Clan, and Goat Beastmen, along with a few small demihuman tribes who had pledged their allegiance and come under the shelter of the Divine Door, spent their days defending their territory as they led a peaceful life. While the Goat Beastmen were inherently savage and believed in the oppression of the weak, having fallen against the combined forces of the Griff and Dark Dwarves, they had suppressed their desires, curious about the miracles enacted by the Griff and Dark Dwarves. Amazed by the divine spectacle, they joined under the same banner and began worshipping the Divine Door. The Alliance had built 4 major villages in the 4 directions from the Divine Door to manage themselves. The city of the Griff, on the peaks of multiple hills, was named after the Griff who discovered the Divine Door, Greater. Greater was located north of the Divine Door. Similarly, to the south was Zeo Aria, the home of the Dark Dwarves. The Dark Dwarves had migrated near the Divine Door to better maintain their link and connection to the Supreme Deity. Tortius, the home of the Turtle Clan, that lay to the west. To the east was Morsius, home of the Goat Beastmen. The 4 towns surrounded the Divine Door, which stood within the hill erected by the Dark Dwarves with the aid of the Goat Beastmen. The hill stood paramount through the ages, as many members of the 4-clan alliance visited it at least once a week. It had become a routine. The alliance functioned with the efforts from the shared effort of all races. While the Dark Dwarves mainly focused on blacksmithing and the research of runecraft. The Turtle Clan primarily focused on agriculture. Being a peaceful race with the longest lifespan among the alliance, they remained secluded, barely making contact with other tribes outside the 4-clan alliance. The Griff, similar to the Turtle Clan, were a peaceful race, unlike their monster counterparts, who were known for their ferocious nature. However, both the monster griffins and the Griff were territorial. The Griff mainly focused on hunting, fishing, and carpentry, while the Goat Beastmen focused on hunting and the research of magical arts, creating new spells, just as the Turtle Clan focused on martial arts. With the alliance established, they survived through trade and bartering, while other small tribes that sought asylum with them took on odd jobs. The alliance had surprisingly created a peaceful environment for its members, except when other tribes of the Abelian Hills invaded any member of the alliance, only to be repelled by the combined force of the alliance. They neither invaded nor expanded their territory. Due to the limited fertility common among them, they hadn't sought more land. Though their population had grown, it was a result of the peace they had maintained. Still, the Goat Beastmen, throughout the years, had favored conquering lands outside their home, standing opposed to the peace the others advocated. They failed to understand the restrained way of life the alliance followed, with 3 of its 4 major members advocating peace and maintaining a controlled defensive stance against invading tribes. It confounded them, as they supported harsher retaliation against aggressors, invaders of their land. Despite the complete eradication of any forces that dared set foot on their territory, enforced by majority vote within the alliance, it was still viewed as cowardice and weak-willed action by the Goat Beastmen. They had always yearned to conquer the world, and with the Supreme Lord's blessing, they saw nothing across the lands and in the wide world that could be considered a true obstacle capable of hindering them. Central Hall. The Temple of the Supreme Lord, the Omnipotent God. Divine Hill of the Supreme God. Exiting the wooden building built inside an adjacent, connecting hill to the one erected around the divine door, a young goat beastman fumed as he walked through the city of Dor. The marketplace was bustling, with stalls set up by members of the Alliance races. Having observed humans, they had learned a fair share of methods to manage goods exchange, to smoothen the transaction and process, as advised by the Dark Dwarves. Under the guise of illusion runes, the demi-humans of the Alliance had accompanied the Dark Dwarves to human cities and tried setting up a similar system to smoothen the process. The sight brought a smile to the young goat beastman's face, as he admired the ever-expanding and advancing city. The city of Dor was a shared city, home to priests and other important figures of the Alliance, along with merchants who brought goods from their home villages to barter. Standing in the market square, the young goat beastman mused, "We have yet to use gold as the primary currency like humans, but the way we trade has no problems so far." The young goat beastman shook his head, unable to understand the stance of the elders at the council, recalling the meeting from just a few minutes ago. While he was pleased with their progress, their position on invaders angered him. "We are powerful, with many strong warriors and casters capable of using third-tier spells, not to mention a few capable of casting fourth-tier spells. I don't understand why those elders are happy with the current status quo." He cursed under his breath. Had it been father, I'm sure he could have managed to convince them, he thought, a crestfallen expression settling on his face. Just as he was about to sink into gloom, a young griff landed beside him and patted him on the back. "I heard about the meeting, Zorak. You were great. Everyone was praising you," muttered the young griff, speaking to the goat beastman named Zorak. Zorak turned to look at his friend, wondering whether the constant rebuttals he had received from the elders were truly something to be praised. But he chose not to voice his thoughts. His friend, oblivious to Zorak's inner turmoil, continued, "I could never manage to utter a single syllable before the Council of Elders, and I'm sure they wouldn't have understood my fragmented way of speech anyway. I wish I had a fraction of your confidence," muttered the young griff as he smiled and joined Zorak on his walk. Amused by his friend's take, Zorak spoke. "I'm sure you can do it yourself, Adravath. All I did was voice my thoughts before the council, only to be met with rebuttals and denial," Zorak muttered, his tone resigned. "Have some pride, my friend. It's no small thing to keep your composure, to not stutter or break down before the council. Yet you managed to stay calm and even argued with them. There aren't many who can brag about that," Adravath replied, his tone carrying genuine emotion. Zorak couldn't help but smile at the nonchalant attitude of his friend. As heirs of their respective tribes, they had grown up together, bonded by shared expectations and burdens. "Well, to be frank, there isn't anyone in these Abelian hills, or possibly even beyond, who can boast of using 9 different martial arts at once, and at such a young age," Zorak muttered, causing his friend Adravath to smile shyly and blush from the excessive praise. The conversation, however, stirred something unpleasant in Zorak. As the son of the goat beastman's previous chief, Zolstrak, a magic caster capable of wielding 5th-tier magic, Zorak was expected to lead his tribe. And yet, he struggled even with casting first-tier spells. His friend had been born a genius. The comparison stung, breeding a quiet jealousy that he tried to bury, forcing a smile as he glanced around the market. To most of the demi-humans, gold didn't hold as much value as it did for humans and dwarves, who used it regularly. Zorak smiled at the merchants bartering goods brought from their homes to exchange with others. As they carried the traded goods back, they would barter them again, sort of making a profit through trade. Though most relied on bartering within their hometowns, in the city of Dor, they primarily used gold coins forged by the dwarves. They had been making progress, and with their current strength, Zorak had felt confident in laying siege to the fortress city to the west. They possessed the power to do so. However, he waited for the council to grant its approval for retaliating against the invading demi-human tribes and the human nation to the east, the same nation that had slain his father while he defended their outpost. Without their approval, he couldn't move the alliance, as even his own tribe valued strength over anything. By which he remained equally powerless on both fronts. He cursed the powerlessness he felt, unable to exact vengeance. And the power he held was only temporary, until the next chief of his tribe was appointed. He cursed his fate, his weakness, and his inability to lead his tribe as the next chief. The elders of the council remained equally powerless, unable to interfere in the selection of a tribe's next leader. Zorak had no powerful allies within his tribe, so his last chance to request retaliation against the humans and the other tribes who kept poking at their alliance seemed like a pipe dream, let alone getting another audience with the elders at the council. It could have been his last chance to present his front request before the council. The truth stung his heart. Zorak watched as his friend bought a couple of fruits from a stall and returned. Passing one to Zorak, Adravath munched on his fruit. Resigned to his fate, Zorak prayed to the divine door, to the supreme god, to aid him in his vengeance. He had yet to take a bite of his fruit when they felt a tremor within the city of Dor. As soon as the tremor subsided, Zorak looked over at his friend Adravath. They had been friends for so long that they could communicate with just a glance. A single look was enough to set them in motion. Adravath unfurled his wings and took flight, while Zorak, born without any talent in magic, was nonetheless capable of sensing mana and soul. He possessed a talent that let him see and sense mana and soul. From the tremor just now, he had felt a subtle burst of violent mana released from the direction of the temple. Worried about a possible attack by humans or other tribes on their divine temple, rage surged through him once again. He cursed the elders of the council for giving a free pass and tolerating the existence of those lowly creatures. Though the alliance considered themselves the chosen mortals of the supreme god, there was still a quiet bias among them, with each race believing itself superior, though none voiced it aloud. They were all lost in the prosperity and power the alliance had brought, each heavily dependent on the others for the continued existence of their clans amid the hungry and savage tribes inhabiting the Abelian hills. Zorak took one last look at the marketplace, noticing the arrival of guards who had begun calming the growing anxiety among the citizens of Dor. Clenching his fist, he activated the teleportation magic rune enchanted onto one of the rings he wore and transported himself directly to a place close to the origin point where he had sensed the magical disturbance. Arriving at the scene, at the entrance of the hill, Zorak noticed the disarray and confusion spreading among the people gathered around the temple of the Supreme Lord, the situation growing more chaotic by the minute. Sensing the soul signature of his friend nearby, he activated another ring inscribed with a flight rune. Zorak took to the skies just as he felt the familiar presence of Adravath approaching. "What's the status?" was the first thing his friend asked as he flew alongside him. "I'm not sure. It was already like this when I got here," Zorak muttered before narrowing his eyes toward the temple's entrance. "Zenith seems to be managing the crowd at the gate. He should know what's going on." "All right, after you," replied Adravath, flying in sync beside him. With teleportation barred within and around the hill housing the temple, Zorak maneuvered through the sky toward it. The two weaved through the crowd until they reached the temple entrance. However, flight was strictly forbidden by the laws of the four-clan alliance within the bounds of the Divine Hill. As such, Zorak and Adravath were not met with a warm welcome. The Templar guards immediately raised their weapons in response. A towering Griff poised his spear at the intruder, despite said intruder being the heir of the Griff tribe. But before the Supreme Lord, the Templar guards wielded authority beyond such titles. Following the Griff, the other Templar guards from the remaining tribes raised their weapons as well, leveling them at the young heirs of the four great tribes of the Alliance. "You are not permitted to fly within the Divine Hill," barked the Griff Templar guard. "Uncle Griff," muttered the young Griff heir, but the tension between them did not ease, as Griff stared daggers at the young Griff heir. The man named Griff wore more ornate armor than the others, signifying his elevated status. His stern gaze remained fixed on Adravath, unmoved by familiarity. Just as things seemed to be escalating, a dark dwarf approached with several others, both dark dwarves and hill dwarves in tow. The leading dark dwarf raised his arm, and the Templar guards bowed in perfect synchrony. "Lord Zenny," Griff muttered as he lowered his head respectfully before the lead dwarf. "Lord Zenny," echoed Adravath and Zorak simultaneously, bowing in turn, as the dark dwarf nodded in acknowledgement. "Adravath, Zorak. Fancy seeing you here," came a familiar voice from behind Zenny, a young dark dwarf stepping forward as he spoke. Just when Adravath thought the situation couldn't grow more complicated, he noticed Zorak looking past him. A beastman of the Turtle clan was approaching the group. The Temple of the Supreme Lord, the Omnipotent God. The Divine Hill. Abelian Hills. New World. "Lord Zenny, has there been any update?" muttered a Turtle clan beastman, his eyes fixed on the temple's entrance. "I'm afraid not," Zenny replied, his tone grim. "There's been no change to the door since the tremor. Though tensions had eased somewhat, thanks to Griff stepping down, the group of young heirs now found themselves deep within the temple, before the divine door itself. So, the divine door suddenly released a burst of magic," Adravath muttered, staring intently at the monumental structure before them. Yes, that's what we were told. And why are you repeating it over and over again? Said the young dark dwarf, glancing sideways at Adravith in mild irritation. The three sat cross-legged on the temple floor, directly before the divine door. Around them, the elders of the council and other high-ranking figures of the alliance had gathered, casting murmurs filled with anxiousness and uncertain glances toward the divine door. Well, easy for you to say, Adravith muttered, exhaling with tension. I can already imagine the extra drills Uncle Grith is going to make me go through as punishment for violating the no-fly law. His tone carried a mixture of dread and resignation. Though the situation was far from ordinary, both Zorak and Zenith couldn't help but chuckle softly at their friend's anxiety. Even amidst the unknown, some things remained comfortingly familiar. It had almost been a day since Adravith and Zorak had flown into the Divine Hill, yet there had been no update on the situation or the phenomenon they had sensed earlier. Do you think it's the day of prophecy? Muttered Zenith, the young heir of the Dark Dwarves tribe and a close friend of Adravith and Zorak. Though both remained silent to their friend's question, the thought had crossed their minds as well. Having grown up under the shadow of the divine door, which had always remained closed, they had come to treat it as nothing more than a revered symbol of their supreme god. It had been nearly 2 centuries since the last recorded instance of the door opening. To them, the only miracles associated with the divine door had been its healing aura and the powerful runes it recorded, runes so complex that even the dwarves had once struggled to inscribe or enchant a single one onto an item. It seemed far-fetched to believe the divine door could actually open, or that it led to some divine domain, especially since all it had was a decorated wall behind and the temple built around it. Yet, as they each silently pondered the reason behind the sudden burst of mana, their thoughts were shattered when the divine door, which had long been unmoving as a statue, emitted a radiant golden light. The light blinded their vision for a second, and the divine door finally opened. The end. Drop a comment and leave a review. Be it negative or positive, but make sure to give constructive criticism. Also, if you think you can add anything of value to the FIC, then you are more than welcome to comment. Any thoughts or questions, ask them in the comment section. I'll try to answer them as soon as I can. If you can, I'm hurrying up the progress by a bit. Initially, I had planned create an acre around this city of Dor and the 4-clan alliance with the Divine Dor Supreme Lord's religion in the Abelian Hills. But from my own impatience and with this being a fanfic, where most readers are expecting to read Overlord fanfic, as the reaction or development of OG characters of Overlord. I am sort of info-dumping a bit background knowledge to not leave you in the dark at the start of this chapter and at the end of the previous chapter. As I slowly convey all the information about the geography of the Alliance to condition of the Alliance through conversations and observation or from reports or something else. I had planned to have an arc around this, but such is fate. Anyway, don't worry, you wouldn't be having such dump from narrator perspective going forward unless it about OCs or knowledge from canon, that Mick will or can sort of change through his presence. So, I have tried keeping this chapter a bit longer than the rest. Chapter 36. Avalon. The Eternal Flying Garden of Utopia, Avalon. Abelian Hills, New World. Overlord verse. Unknown floor of the Eternal Flying Garden of Utopia, Avalon. Deep within the darkness, a colossal face emerged, its form woven from shifting dark energy and glowing, ever-changing patterns. The features outlining the face constantly morphs ethereally, evoking a feeling as if the being was unbound by physical dimensions. Its expression shifted with unease, from the after-effects of the violent and oppressive aura that he had felt wash over him. It tried to pierce through the layers of reality, laid through number of floors throughout Avalon, to see across dimensions and glimpse at the source of the disturbance, but its efforts were in vain. The glowing patterns across his form slowed in tightening, as the vibrant colors dimmed to deeper shades. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the fluid contours of his face draw inward, giving the impression of concern. Though he lacks a mouth, the lower part of his visage contracts faintly, hinting at unease. The space around him grows still. The darkness surrounding the colossal being contracts, and from the swirl of the darkness, a figure walks out. The form of the figure gradually takes shape, revealing a tall humanoid, cloaked in dark high-shoulder armor paired with a long black cape. His head was wreathed in mystic flames, and his eyes burned with constant light with intense energy, as his pupils flickered in and out of existence. The being shook his head, and walked through the endless darkness. Walking through the void, his thoughts lingered. I felt a strange energy before that oppressive aura. The figure, lost in his musings, came to the edge of the darkness just as a portal unfolded before him, its swirling light spilling into the black. Without hesitation, he stepped through. He emerged atop a towering spire that rose into the skies at the very heart of a ruined alien city. The wind tugged faintly at his long black cape as his gaze swept across the scene below. His army, golems of different forms, lay sprawled across the streets and ruins. The golems bore resemblance to leviathans, and Chitauri from Marvel. Despite their inherent nature as golems, as they were supposed to be resistant to mind-based attacks, yet they all lay in a state similar to what living experienced when they fell unconscious. Dormammu, floor guardian of the third floor of Avalon, narrowed his burning eyes. His sight extending across the floor with his sight-based skill, he was fed information of the whole floor. The sight confounded him, while he questioned the situation of his floor and guild. It wasn't just the third floor. A similar situation could be observed across other floors of Avalon. On the fourth floor, Ashbourne stood at the entrance of his castle, gazing over the vast expanse. Behind him lay the unconscious bodies of his area guardians, and the same condition afflicted the pop monsters, NPCs, mercenaries, and summoned creatures within his domain. Looking up at the sky, worry gnawed at him for Avalon's fate. I hope the Supreme Lord hasn't forsaken Avalon, he mused, his eyes never leaving the view of his floor. Despite the strange stillness, Ashbourne did not abandon his post, his duty to defend Avalon firm, as he awaited further communication from Agartha regarding the strange situation of his floor. On the fifth floor, Belordius, the area guardian of the city's first section, rode his steed through the skies. The dark horse, its head a shifting mass of black ooze, released a chilling neigh that resonated with a ghostly aura. Hooves striking against the very air, it galloped toward the city's heart, where a grand and imposing castle stood in all its magnificence. The horse wore a magical cloak, engraved with the guild emblem, permitting it to use its skywalk skill. Despite letting the skywalk skill bypass the anti-flight restriction within the guild base, the same approach couldn't be used with less than fly greater than spell or the inherent skill of the beings with wings. As Belordius approached the castle, the horse descended in a measured arc, stomping down upon the invisible sky road toward the castle's entrance. Waiting before the great doors stood Ibis Necron, a fellow area guardian. High above, on the peak of the tallest tower, the third and final guardian of the floor, Alucard, who sat with an air of complete detachment, his eyes closed, unmoved by Belordius' arrival. The relationship among the fifth floor's area guardians was neither warm nor hostile. They served the same master, answering to the queen of the city, the floor guardian, yet they typically kept to their own territories, rarely intruding upon each other's domains. But their current condition and situation was anything but normal, warranting their personal intervention, prompting them to leave their abode to visit their floor guardian, their queen. Belordius dismounted, his boots striking the stone as he strode toward Ibis Necron. Without a word, the two guardians who stood before the castle door and their colleague, resting atop the tower, all waited for their queen. What about Alucard? Belordius muttered, his gaze lifting to the castle's highest spire. He's asleep, Ibis replied, shaking his head with disinterest. Was he affected by the aura? Belordius asked, eyes narrowing at the motionless figure sprawled atop the spiral peak. He, like us, is a level 100 NPC of Avalon, the Overlord skeleton caster answered in his deep, resonant voice. The chances of him being affected are minimal, but the debuffs we feel must be afflicting him as well. Their discussion shifted, delving into the workings of Avalon and the subtle disturbance that had unsettled them. Though our floor feels unchanged and functions as intended, Ibis murmured, his tone uncertain, it still feels different somehow. True, Belordius agreed. The traps are operational, the wards hold, and the city runs as it should. Yet, something is off. His voice trailed into silence as he gazed at the ominous red moon suspended in the sky, its baleful light drenching the city that never knew day. I hope our queen is aware of the change, Ibis said at last, his sigh curling into the still air. Belordius gave a slow nod, turning his eyes back to the towering castle. I hope the Supreme Lord is watching over us. Just as their hopes turned toward the blessing of the Supreme Lord, the heavy doors of the castle creaked open. From within stepped out a blonde female vampire clad in a long white dress, her crimson eyes immediately finding the two area guardians. Belordius and Ibis could feel it at once, the overwhelming presence of a world champion, the successor of Rex Sub Luna, one of the supreme one of Vanitas Regnum Anta. Arcude Brunastud emerged unhurried, seemingly untouched by the urgency written plainly on her guardians' faces. Her gaze swept across the sprawling city that lay beyond the castle's walls. Every undead summon, every monster, lay slumped and motionless under the after effects of the oppressive pressure of the mysterious aura that had swept through Avalon. A faint sigh escaped her lips, her expression softening ever so slightly. She was relieved by the state of her floor, as the functions of her floor remained intact. She stepped down from the stairs linked to the entrance of the castle door, walking past them without haste, a silent gesture bidding her area guardians to follow. The castle itself was a vast fortress of black stone, built atop a high, elevated platform at the city's heart. From this vantage, the city stretched outward in all directions, a tangled web of streets and walls forming a defensive labyrinth. The winding paths, split into 3 great sections, acted as layered sections against any intruder. Each section was guarded by an area guardian, their territories forming an unbroken chain of defense between the outermost reaches of the city and the looming black gates of the enormous castle at the center. The city's design was an intricate work built with high complex infrastructures. Its creation had consumed a great deal of time and work. To Kai, the finished result had been worth every effort, pain and time spent on it, so much so that it had sent him over the moon, with satisfaction. He had been giddy with happiness about it, though he hid it from others. Kai along with the ones he had hired had together brought this city to life, so for him to see the end result, he had been too happy. Now, standing at the edge of the castle wall high above the ground, Arcude leaned casually against the cold stone railing, her gaze sweeping over the vast city below. Valordius and Ibis followed in her steps, coming to stand behind their queen. They were still quietly wondering about Alucard when the answer revealed itself in the most unexpected way. He was already there, cloaked in a long dark red coat. The dark figure stood directly behind Arcude, having successfully snuck up on them. Neither guardian had sensed his approach, and the fact that he had passed them so completely undetected only deepened their wariness of him. With their queen's arrival, the floor guardian of the 5th floor, Valordius and Ibis had remained on edge. The oppressive aura that had swept over Avalon left them wary, their senses sharpened for the slightest sign of attack. Yet what unsettled them was Arcude's almost languid demeanor. She wandered her gaze across the floor without the faintest urgency or caution, as though this emergency were nothing more than a passing curiosity. Alucard, too, gave no outward sign of alarm. But unlike Arcude, he remained cautious. Beneath his calm, his mind worked through possible measures to strengthen the floor's security and prevent such an incident from repeating. Arcude, indifferent to the tension etched across her 3 guardians' faces, seemed far more preoccupied with the information Alice had relayed to her, about the source of the oppressive aura that assailed Avalon. The aura that assaulted the NPCs of Avalon, knocking them all unconscious, with its power more effective to those below level 100. Her thoughts drifted, slipping into memories of the past, the Supreme Ones, and above all, the Supreme Lord. The image of meeting her creator still lingered in vivid detail. Barely a day had passed since she had first stood before the all-powerful being who had brought her into existence. What could have provoked his wrath? Was all she could think about. The question gnawed at her until she let it go, her expression softening into something almost serene. In the end, her conclusion was simple, for the one who had erred. Whatever it was, or whoever it was that earned the Supreme Lord's anger, is fated to perish, utterly and without trace. It was inevitable, their destruction was destined to the NPCs of Avalon, for they found it strange to think otherwise. Arcude felt a quiet relief at the thought that her creator, the Supreme Lord, had not abandoned them, nor Avalon so far. Yet that comfort was shadowed by the second piece of news she had received. He was the only one here at the present. No other Supreme Ones could be sensed, and all attempts to contact them had failed. The thought was a wound to her heart, even as she clung to the reassurance of his presence. She shared in the silent grief of the other floor guardians, mourning the absence of the Supreme Ones. Her mind drifted to her last memory of meeting one of them. It had been like any other day, she recalled, when the Supreme Ones had long since ceased to visit this floor, or my castle. The halls had grown quiet, and she had remained within them, keeping her post alongside the area guardians. The silence had become routine. She mused, staring at the distant hills outside the boundary of her city. When, suddenly one day, Lord Rex Sub Luna visited my castle. The memory still stirred a faint ache in her chest. After so long without a visit from any of the Supreme Ones, his sudden arrival had been a shock, one laced with joy. She had yearned for the days when Vanitas Regnum Anta gathered within Avalon's halls, plotting their grand conquests across Yggdrasil. Those golden days had faded into history, leaving only the echo of their glory behind. But that day, she could recall it as though it had just passed, the moment Rex Sub Luna stepped into her castle, and the words he spoke to her. Chapter 37. The River of Eternal Darkness. The eternal flying castle of Utopia, Avalon. Earth 2138. Overlord verse. The sound of footsteps rang through the vast throne room of the dark castle, each step reverberating against the cold stone and echoing through the cavernous space. Shadows clung to the pillars lining the hall, their surfaces draped with the black, silver and gold banners of Vanitas Regnum Anta. A lone figure strode forward, their presence cutting through the stillness. The vampire queen, seated upon her magnificent throne at the far end of the chamber, watched in silence as the player approached her. The Supreme One of Vanitas Regnum Anta came to a halt before the throne. Their gaze met hers, the Queen of the City of Death, and the floor guardian of the River of Eternal Darkness. Lowering himself to her level, the Supreme One crouched, holding her eyes with an unblinking, unreadable expression. As his face remained emotionless and unmoving just like the rest of his kind. The silence continued for some time, before the Supreme One commanded the Queen of the City of Death to stand. Stand. The Queen obeyed at once, rising to her full height before him. Yet what followed unsettled her far more than the command itself. The Supreme One raised a hand and began manipulating something unseen to her, his fingers weaving patterns in the air, gestures she recognized as the strange, and linked it with the otherworldly workings of the console, a tool only the Supreme Ones and the ones called players could wield. She could not fathom its full function, but she watched each precise movement in silence. Then, without warning, she felt it, a link form between them. Her breath caught. She had known this sensation only once before, in the presence of her creator, the Supreme Lord himself and no one else. The days playing Yggdrasil were good, the Supreme One murmured. The queen tilted her head internally while she remained frozen in reality, as she was puzzled by his words. She understood Yggdrasil, the great world tree adrift in the void, its vast branches bearing countless realms as leaves. Her own home, Avalon, was formed and was in one such leaf in that endless expanse of the void. But the meaning behind his tone, the weight in his voice eluded her. He did not notice her questions, and remained ignorant of her emotions and thoughts. It was all fun and games, he went on, his voice low, almost to himself, but things don't last forever. She felt it then, a strange power enveloping her. Their connection tightened through her inheritance of his prowess and essence. The special and rare racial classes she had inherited from Manabu, interlaced with the unique job classes that followed. The bond grew stronger, as if roots were sinking deeper into her very soul. She, with her connection to him, earned her the title of world champion. Without answering her confusion, the Supreme One had done it. As he transferred her his everything, his racial classes, his job classes, his gear, his entire inventory. She received it all in silence, though her mind churned with confusion. What had caused it all? Why was he doing this? She mused, but was presented with no answer. She knew of Zorcius, another player of Vanitas Regnum Anta, who had once transferred his own classes to Ibis. But Zorcius was only a player, one among many others who were part of the Great Guild, her guild. While Evernight Candidum, Rex Sub Luna, Heiki Kaji, Kindred Star, and Immortal Witch were the true Supreme Ones, residing within Avalon. Yet above them all stood the Supreme Lord, Morinitium Kai Telos, her creator. And now, Rex Sub Luna, the man before her, was doing the same, as if awaiting his end, like those players. The Supreme Ones were eternal, and were powerful, unlike those lowly players. The Supreme Ones were among the higher beings who were responsible for creation of Yggdrasil. She mused. As much information she had heard in the passing, from the conversation among the players and the Supreme Ones of the Guild. Without paying her inner turmoil any heed, or rather he remained oblivious of her inner struggle. Rex Sub Luna continued. I started playing Yggdrasil for a reason, he said at last, his voice tired, almost hollow. And now, maybe I'm free of that reason. Or maybe I've simply lost it. I'm not sure anymore. I suppose, I lost the game. A game that I never had any chance of winning. He turned away from her, his gaze lifting to the black, silver and gold banner of the guild. The flicker of its embroidered crest seemed to draw him backward through time, into memories that stung his heart for all the joy and emotions they held. She stood in silence, unable to comprehend the situation. Something about the way he spoke, calm, distant, made her uneasy. Yet he offered her no further explanation, as he informed her of his decisions rather than to converse with her. For a moment, with their link in being the NPC of Vanitas Regnum Anta, they were meant to serve the Supreme Ones of the Vanitas Regnum Anta, she wondered if she would see him here again. Arcude, the Queen of the City of Death, stared hard at the back of the Supreme One, Rex Sub Luna. Oblivious to her inner turmoil as she was assaulted with, What ifs? Her mind was occupied with negative thoughts, facing a crisis at the prospect of the end of a Supreme One. Rex, unaware of her state, continued. I played this game for her, gave it my all, and spent my life in this game till the end, he muttered, his voice laced with sadness. He spoke to no one but himself as he unloaded thoughts he had kept buried most of his life. I am not special like Kai or Shoko, his mutterings lingered in the air as Arcade struggled to comprehend them. Finally, Manabu, also known as Rex Sub Luna, stared at the ceiling and muttered, his voice heavy with resignation. I fell in love with the wrong person. The silence after his words felt like an eternity. Manabu shook his head and repeated with clarity and composure, added with a self-deprecating laugh. I fell for the wrong woman. Turning around, he looked at the queen of the city of death. Arcade, you were my favorite NPC of this guild, and maybe in this game. You both have polar opposite builds and are quite different. Your lore and flavor text is nothing like her personality, but you were the bridge that brought her attention to me and helped me find conversation topics. She helped me and provided suggestions for your customization after Kai was done with your creation. Though I hate Kai as much as he gained her love. His words broke Arcade for reasons she could not identify. Hearing him speak of his love shattered her heart, and she could not reason her emotions. While she failed to identify the emotion that pulled at her heart, as she felt like a broken toy. Leaving her in confusion, Rex Sub Luna continued as he turned to walk away from the throne. I gave Yggdrasil, and her, my everything, and made new friends. But in the end, I lost her to him and my close friend Hitoshi in this cruel, uncaring and unforgiving world, he said, his tone carrying quiet powerlessness. Unaware of her thoughts, Rex Sub Luna stepped out of the throne room, his last words lingering in the air. After everything, here I am, talking to an NPC, trying to collect my emotions, and maybe regain my composure before I talk to Kai. But I would have never imagined talking to an NPC, I have lost it. A tear traced down Arcade's cheek as she looked over the city, her city. She brushed it away and steadied her heart, comforted by the presence of her master, her creator. Yet, a quiet dread lingered at the thought of the Supreme Lord casting them aside. From her interactions, she understood the powerlessness of the Supreme Ones, their circumstances not so different from the players. After all but her master faced an inevitable end, just as NPCs such as her, too, would one day meet their end. Everything in this universe will one day meet their end, except my master. She mused. Yet, she struggled to imagine a future without her master's presence. Though the Supreme Ones, like Rex Sub Luna, who caused her great deal pain, the feeling that she still failed to comprehend were, still, incomparable to her master, and creator. The comfort his presence offered to her and to the other NPCs of Avalon. The day that parts us from the Supreme Lord is still far, until then, we will serve him with all we have. Such is the cycle for beings like us, bound to an eternal master. She drew strength from the thought and turned to speak. Get things in order, Alucard, Ibis, Belordius. We live to serve the supreme beings, and we should strive to meet their expectations. Making sure to never disappoint them. Her downcast look had raised concern among her area guardians, but as they witnessed her renewed vigor in commanding them, they pushed the thought aside. Her energy seemed to spark a faint motivation within them, though their curiosity lingered about the source of the aura. Reading their expressions, Arcade sighed. I am not aware of the details, but the aura we felt came from our master. Something must have happened that earned his wrath, she muttered. Belordius's brows furrowed, his voice a low growl. If I find the wretch responsible, I will tear them apart piece by piece, until there's nothing left to bury. His tone sharpened with each word, the air around him briefly stirring with killing intent before he reined it back with emotional suppression, yet the fury burned his soul. Ibis's voice was measured at first. Such insolence, to provoke the Supreme Lord, but his composure cracked with emotion suppression of the undead, but he continued with his tone rising. It is unforgivable. He caught himself, exhaled slowly, only for the calm to slip again moments later. No, utterly intolerable. Those maggots. His voice rose and fell in that same cycle, frustration simmering beneath his attempts at restraint. Alucard said nothing, as he planned for ways he could skew and torture the one responsible for upsetting their master. Their reaction and their bubbling anger resonated with Arcade. She stood satisfied with their commitment, and with a faint nod, gave them her approval. Wishing and praying to the Supreme Lord to grant her the opportunity to enact her revenge for upsetting her master and by extension her with their pointless existence. She begged to be given the opportunity, while everyone remained oblivious about the reason for his burst of anger. Similar situations could be observed throughout the guild, as the floor guardians scrambled to find the source of the incident, before Rhodes visited the ninth floor, Chaos C. Meanwhile, on the 10th floor, Sebastian stood on the balcony of Agartha, gazing at the garden of the enormous castle at its center. Behind him were beds, Doraemon, the assistant butler, had taken from his supposed pocket. The nature of that pocket still puzzled him, a creation of the Supreme Lord that amazed him. A topic they hadn't had time to discuss before. After the mysterious incident where the oppressive aura washed over the guild base, everyone on the 10th floor, except for him, the children of Yggdrasil, and King Hassan, had fallen unconscious. While King Hassan oversaw the castle's security, the children of Yggdrasil split tasks, focusing on finding the cause of the aura and surveying the guild base. Sebastian tended to the unconscious and worked to heal them. He began with Doraemon and Doremi, the assistant butlers, with the help of Jeanne d'Arc, who was possibly the strongest support NPC and the guild's best healer. Once Doraemon and Doremi were awake, he assigned Doremi the task of managing the maids. Sebastian watched Jeanne d'Arc work alongside Doremi as he stood with Doraemon by the balcony railings. "Your pocket is quite intriguing, Doraemon," Sebastian muttered with curiosity. Unlike other storage pouches in Yggdrasil, Doraemon's 4D pocket was supposedly infinite in size, holding many old, failed projects from the guild's members and supreme ones, few from the old times. Sebastian had also heard that the Supreme Lord, the guild master of Vanitas Regnum Anta and his creator, had once purchased the treasuries of many falling crafting guilds and clans, and storing them within this pocket and in the other pocket of Doremi. The mysteries of the 4D pocket fascinated him, as he wondered about its usefulness for a butler. When he thought of ways he could better serve his master with such an item. "It's a gift from the Supreme Lord himself, granted to me after Master had finished creating Truth in Babylon. So, of course, it will be amazing," Doraemon replied with pride oozing from his speech. The many goods acquired from dying clans and guilds were mostly entrusted to Doraemon and Doremi for safekeeping. Kai, enjoying his role-playing, made sure his NPCs follow their lore closely, though with his vague recollection, their flavor text wasn't entirely accurate for most of them. Added with their loyalty and dedication, combined with their self-sacrificing nature, many of them were a bit different compared to their original counterparts. Sebastian was about to delegate the task of managing the 10th floor, Agartha to Doraemon and the rest of the maids. Just as he was about to convey his wish to depart from the castle to join his master and to stay by his side as the loyal butler he was, he observed a commotion break out between the children of Yggdrasil. And behind Sebastian and Doraemon, the maids and other significant NPCs had woken up, and their duty to awaken the regular maids, other staff and the rest of the NPCs of the guild continued as they strived to fulfill their duty of upkeeping the guild base. Asterisk. Chapter 38. Dragon's Soul. Chaos C. 9th floor. The Eternal Flying Castle of Utopia, Avalon. New World. Overlord verse. Rhodes, after the task delegation war, made haste to find his master and creator, Morse. His great master, Mor Inidium Kai Telos, was commonly addressed as Morse, at least, that was what Rhodes had observed, along with many other titles used by the players and supreme ones of Vanitas Regnum Anta. He arrived at the edge of the waterfall, stepping through the portal that led into a door, deep within the Dragon's Soul, a private castle belonging to his great master floating freely in 9th floor. Entering a vast chamber known as the Key of Stars, Rhodes paused to take in the sight. The room was immense, its walls lined with countless doors of varying shapes and sizes, some suspended mid-air. Wisps of light drifted lazily through the air, casting a faint glow on polished marble floors. Above, a grand glass dome displayed constellations that shifted subtly, and at its center stretched the image of an immense tree whose branches reached into the stars. At the roots of this mystical tree lay a colossal, slumbering beast. The painting of the mystical tree and stars left Rhodes in awe for its realistic feel. The tree is most probably depiction of Yggdrasil, but what is that blue orb? Rhodes wondered as he gazed at the enormous blue orb with many green and brown patches upon it, conveying its existence as a planet, floating above. Rhodes shook his head, dispelling the lingering distraction, and made his way out of the castle. He emerged into a small garden set beside the grand structure of the castle, both perched upon a floating island. Before him stretched an endless expanse of sky. No horizon, no land, only clouds drifting lazily across a vast azure sky. Not far away, another fragment of land drifted in the sky, small and empty save for a single wooden door and a patch of grass that filled the land. Tilting his gaze upward, Rhodes caught sight of a colossal dragon coiled gracefully around the spiraling towers of the castle. Sunlight glinted faintly across its black scales as it lifted its head, and a faint smile crossed Rhodes' lips. The dragon stirred, its enormous body wriggled through the sky. With the grace of a dragon, it flew high to the sky, and dived back, making an arch above. It descended in a graceful arc. With a slow, deliberate motion, it glided effortlessly through the open sky until its vast form hovered before him. Its face loomed like a living mountain, yet its golden eyes were calm. Greetings, Deicide, Rhodes said, his tone carrying both respect and familiarity as he gazed upon enormous figure. Greetings to you as well, greater demon Rhodes, the dragon replied. Unlike Rhodes, the dragon's voice resonated within Rhodes' mind. As the dragon communicated through telepathy. Rhodes bowed in formal greeting, and the dragon mirrored the gesture with a slow, deliberate dip of its massive head. When the exchange ended, Rhodes studied Deicide, curiosity glinting in his crimson eyes. But tell me, Deicide, why are you here? And not by Great Master's side. His tone held genuine puzzlement at the sight. The dragon remained silent at the question before letting out a deep sigh. Its expression only deepened Rhodes' confusion. Seeing this, the dragon named Deicide shook his head and finally spoke. I was left by Great Master to guard his castle before he left, it muttered, then its massive form shimmered and shrank, morphing into a small wolf-like creature with dual-shaded fur. Comparable in size to a wolf pup, it stretched lazily, its black and white coat gleaming in the sunlight. Rhodes stared at the pup, taken aback by the sudden transformation, when a voice entered his mind, Deicide speaking through telepathy. It's a polymorph skill of dragons, one I inherited from Great Master. Easier for me to travel this way, the young creature explained. Rhodes only shook his head at the childish display, though his question still hung unanswered. I suppose that's true, but you've yet to explain why you are not at Great Master's side after he was enraged, Rhodes pressed, irritation creeping into his tone. The wolf pup dipped its head, avoiding his gaze in silent shame. But Rhodes' patience, however, was wearing thin at the evasive replies. Deicide lifted his head, sensing the ominous aura seeping from Rhodes. Though confident in his ability to fight a child of Yggdrasil and drag the battle to a stalemate, there was no reason for such a clash. Shaking off the distracting, shameful thought, he decided to speak plainly. While I was left to guard Great Master's castle, some time later I sensed a strange disturbance in Avalon. Curious, I attempted to teleport to Master's side to investigate, Deicide said, his voice low. It was then, with the rest of Master's NPCs and servants scattered across dimensions he created, that I felt it firsthand. I felt what you and others couldn't begin to comprehend. His breathing slowed, the memory threatening to eat away at his mind. Rhodes watched in silence, trying to piece the events together. Rhodes remained quiet to let the dragon continue its tale, to let it confirm his hypothesis, of the possible course of events, that played out. I was struck by a power that nearly consumed my mind and my very essence. It was destructive, that I barely survived with my level 100 status. And even now, I carry innumerable debuffs, each one eroding and cleaving away at my health, mana, stamina, and even sanity. Rhodes understood the situation. Avalon, created from the remnants of a world, was classified as a world item. Only world enemies, world champions, world-class skill holders, and world item holders were immune or mostly unaffected by its power, though only world enemies were truly unaffected. Unable to find the right way to express himself, Deicide blurted out, I was scared of Master, I couldn't approach him in his rage. His fury burned everything in its path. The whole floor was set ablaze, even the dragon's soul caught fire, as the flames of destruction threatened to consume everything here. I barely survived. Though, Great Master has calmed now. His gaze lingered on the dragon's soul, preserved in pristine condition, as if what happened had been nothing more than a dream. The floor, separated by a dimensional barrier that mostly blocked the effects of his outburst, it left the NPCs in other floors with only mild symptoms. Since the floor was part of the guild base, a world item, its restoration required neither gold, nor player intervention. The guild base repaired itself, restoring everything to its set condition in record time. Rhodes remained silent, listening to the dragon's account, yet still failed to grasp the fear it spoke of. Everything within Avalon, NPCs, pets, structures, all existed to serve and, if necessary, sacrifice themselves for the Great Master's cause. It was still quite a diluted way of thought process among the NPCs, as to them, everything in existence only existed, because of the graceful nature of their Supreme Lord, and it was their privilege and duty to sacrifice their meaningless existence to serve the Supreme Ones. While pets from Yggdrasil, unlike the NPCs, were not blindly self-sacrificial, though pets still possessed self-preservation characteristics, albeit for situations when their masters weren't in harm's way or were in danger. As long as their master wasn't endangered, they lived to their nature as species with self-preservation instincts. Shaking his head to dismiss such unnecessary thoughts, which would only delay him from serving his master, Rhodes picked up the wolf pup into his arms and cast less than fly greater than, gliding toward the adjacent floating island. And he opened the door and walked through it. Chaos C. Ninth floor, the eternal flying garden of Utopia, Avalon. New world. Overlord verse. Kai lay slumped on the floor, eyes fixed on the ceiling, indifferent to the aftermath of his outburst. Throughout the destruction and the seamless restoration carried out by Avalon's autonomous functions is the world item, and he had not moved an inch. Whether it was the influence of his character lore and race setting or simply the exhaustion of a burned-out soul, he made no effort to shield himself. Though the flames had failed to harm him, as the flames were born of him. Yet his stillness was unnatural, unlike him, and unlike any sane human's instinct in such a situation. As he made no effort to shield himself from the flames, letting himself burn and possibly take damage, coupled with pain that was now transmigrated to him. Ordinarily, someone unaware of the true nature of their surroundings, without exact measure of their strength would have fled from the fire, perhaps testing its prowess before daring to endure it. But Kai, fully unaware of the nature and the prowess of the flames, simply watched the inferno with a detached fascination. It was the first time he had witnessed such flames or used it. It was unlike his old self who loved to explore the unknown, it was far from the curious and eager self who once sought to try anything new. Even his love for magic and his meticulous preparations for arrival in the new world seemed muted, as though that old self had been buried beneath layers of disinterest. He refused to dwell on the new world, on players, dragon lords, or Yggdrasil itself. Fuck Ains Ulgaun and the Dragon Emperor, who supposedly summoned players to this world, he thought bitterly. The future was uncertain, and his mind drifted instead to his past, his second life, which he had treated with casual indifference. His nonchalant attitude, where he treated it as nothing more than a stepping stone toward what he believed would be his true calling, that of a sovereign overlord in a fantasy world. He had been given much in both lives, yet it was always taken from him in the end. He wasn't sure if the trade-offs were worth the sacrifice. But from a neutral point of view, an immortal dragon demon life in a fantasy world sounded far better than a happy life in a dystopian one as immortal. But to Kai now, it didn't matter. He felt betrayed and it was quite simple to him. It's the same age-old question about crying in a Lamborghini, he thought. The excitement he once felt for his plans had soured, leaving him indifferent. Lying on the 9th floor of his guild, he thought of her. He had long kept his distance from love, armed with his experience in the field, he preferred to avoid its pitfalls. Decoding himself and his priorities, he had streamlined his life, and had even removed or suppressed those unnecessary flaws. With his years of experience built in the field, he had learned his fair share of errors that he had to deal with. Yet in his esoteric nature to seek the big O, in his life, she had managed to pull him in with her nested layers of presence in his life. That he never knew existed. With the way she made him feel wanted without guilt or manipulation, as she never expected anything from him. Threw him off his bound, as he looped to infinity. While she saw him for who he was, changed her life to fit his, while he had given her almost nothing. She was the girl who crossed the world for his attention and found joy in the small things he enjoyed. Kai wasn't sure where to go from here, as he remained pathless. He questioned his existence and the universe. It felt as though the universe had played one cruel prank after another on him. Every time he managed to get a grip on life, every time he was close to building something worth holding onto, it was ripped away by some badly timed twist of fate. A cruel jest from the universe. Yet, it happened every single time, he was close to figuring out his life. He cursed the universe and the supposed imaginary deity who might have been responsible for pulling the strings of his life. All in jest, as they jested through trying to balance his chaotic life, where they had only managed to twist it further, bleeding the joy from his life, as they had fuked the soul out of his life in due process. Lying sprawled across the floor, drunk on grief and intoxication, he muttered to no one, "I don't know what I'm supposed to do, fuked by the ghost of you. Oh, take me back to the night we met. When the night was full of terrors, and your eyes were full of tears, from the thrill and glee. After you fed my life to your heart's desire. Oh, take me back to the night we met. He muttered, sprawled across the floor, his mind filled with destructive ideas, and plans. I had all and then, most of you, some and now, none of you. He exhaled a laugh without humor. Take me back to the night before you fed my life. His thoughts grew darker, more dangerous. Images bloomed in his mind, of setting worlds aflame, of burning not just this planet but the whole universe. His gaze even drifted toward Earth. Then, inevitably, his mind turned to Yggdrasil. If the great tomb of Nazareth had arrived in the new world alongside him, could he storm it? Conquer it? Take me, to the night we met, he whispered again, though now the words carried an indifference. Chapter 39. Dragon's Soul. Chaos Sea, 9th floor. The eternal flying castle of Utopia, Avalon. New World. Overlord verse. Kai shook his head as he slowly rose to his feet, his thoughts drifting toward his NPCs. The demon in him thirsted for vengeance, and possibly control over his chaotic situation, while his dragon instinct screamed for conquest, to lay siege to the world and claim it as his own for everything that he had to suffer. In the end, both of them ate away at his psyche, his sense of reason, as they both compelled him to let the world suffer and make the world pay. How the times had changed. He had once pitied Momonga for his undead body and his emotional suppression, robbing him of the joys of life. Yet, now he desired for the same emotional suppression, plunged between his instincts as a demon, dragon and his voice of reason as Kai. Is this my karma? He wondered aloud. He brushed the dust from his clothes, an act that felt strange after years in Yggdrasil where such things were impossible and unneeded. His coat and equipment remained as immaculate as ever, as they were immune to the passage of time with their status as magical artifact or equipment, being able to restore themselves for eternity. He shook his head to rid himself of unnecessary thoughts, as his pride, and various complex emotions that arose from his race disturbed his sense of self, compelling him to give in to his desires, with all his prowess. Sighing at the prospect of an immortal life that stretched endlessly before him, he steadied his resolve. So is this what my existence will be, as a demon who has no concept of lifespan? He mumbled. His gaze shifted to the throne, restored to its former glory. Slowly, he walked toward it, raising a hand to call forth a familiar object. With a whisper of magic, less than a port greater than activated, and a small, charred black slate appeared in his palm. The thing had once been his phone, though it could hardly be called that now. Kai's lips curled into a faint smile. At least my primal flames paired with my primordial demonic origin were worth the outburst. An attack fueled by his rage, bolstered by the raw might of his level and stats, had burned and scarred an item classified as divinetier and a floor of his guild. Even in the midst of all the despair he felt, there was a flicker of satisfaction. It was an unintended consequence of his breakdown, but one that gave him some hope to live, his yearning for magic, soothing his soul. The demonstration made for a good testing of his prowess. Anyway, this will be handy, he mumbled. Extending his hand forward, a dark rift tore open before him, spacetime folding inward to reveal a dark portal connected to his personal inventory. From within, he drew a staff of gleaming white, its shaft sculpted in the likeness of a serpent. As the rift closed before him, the weapon's details caught the light. A white snake with a single crimson eye, its body coiled into the shape of infinity, was engraved upon the handle, its head devouring its own tail. Raising the staff over the charred slate in his other hand, Kai willed to activate the world item he held. Obeying his wish, the world item activated, and the blackened piece of metal began to shift. Edges softened, cracks sealed, and the scorched surface paled, until the object in his palm began to once again resemble the item it had been before, as he finally activated the magic array engraved at its back. Restore, as the phone was restored to its former condition. A faint smile curved his lips. Wheel of Snake, a world item that can rewind time for objects, living beings, or even an entire designated region with all the beings present in the region affected. His gaze lingered on the staff. Though, it can't affect those outside the region or weren't within the boundary of the region when activated. He mused. Kai stored the world item back into his inventory and made his way to the throne, phone still in hand. Ascending the short flight of steps, he settled into the seat, resting his back against the backrest, while his right hand supported his chin. Fate is cruel, isn't it? He mused. After my own failed attempt at love with my experience, I reacted quite heartlessly on Nameless Shadow and belittled him. And now, what I have become. A resigned smile touched his lips, as his facial features eased up. Never mind them. All I can do now is move forward, and perhaps even seek the truth behind the betrayal, any day now. His thoughts grew quieter, assailed by memories, of a time when everything felt new, when her presence had brought joy to his monotone life. Thinking about the betrayal, his desire to dig the reason, sort of motivated him, but as the feeling of gloom assaulted him, tearing away at his heart. He exhaled slowly. Never mind that, I can think about it later. This is a sad state of affairs, he muttered to himself. He was about to focus on assessing the state of the guild base, anything to keep his mind moving, when the massive doors at the far end of the throne room rumbled open. Though, the hidden entrance to the dragon's soul lay behind his throne, concealed by a pillar. The entrance to his throne room, only opened by the giant doors present to the opposite end of the throne, irrespective of the door or teleportation array used to access his floor. Kai waited, patiently, for whoever would enter. The door creaked open, revealing Rhodes, who wore a black suit, and deicide in the form of a small wolf pup. Gazing at them, Kai hurriedly stored his phone inside his inventory. His gaze locked onto them, he had known this would happen, yet the sight still filled him with wonder. His creations brought to life. Still, he realized with faint dismay that he was slouched in the throne like some corpse left to rot. Hardly the posture a supreme one should have for his first meeting with his creations. But by the time that thought struck, they were already within arm's reach. It was far too late to correct himself now. Kai straightened slightly, his gaze locked on them. He had known this would happen, yet the sight still filled him with wonder. His creations, alive. The feeling was a quiet, almost disbelieving happiness. They stopped at the base of the steps and bowed low, dropping to one knee in greeting. Greetings, Great Master, my Creator, Lord Mor Inidium Kai Telos, Rhodes said, voice steady. My master, deicide added simply, his tone joyful. Kai studied them closely, the way they moved, their speech pattern, his mind cataloging every detail. A part of him wondered about the whereabouts and state of his other NPCs, but he pushed that thought aside. These two were here now, kneeling before him, and he couldn't keep them waiting. Greetings to you as well, Rhodes, deicide. You may stand, there's no need for such formalities, Kai said at last. Even as the words left him, he wasn't sure if they were befitting of a supreme one. He had only ever spoken to humans, never to NPCs whose loyalty bordered on worship. We could never, Rhodes began, but was cut short when Kai lifted a hand, cutting off any resistance. Beside him, deicide raised his head. Then, without hesitation, the wolf pup broke into a sprint up the steps. The motion drew a sharp flicker of irritation across Rhodes's face, but he remained kneeling. To deicide, who had been with Kai since hatching from his egg, such an approach seemed natural, almost instinctive. Kai was taken aback by the sudden movement, but didn't stop him. The small form leapt onto his lap, sniffing at his palms before pressing close. With a slow stretch, deicide curled up and settled upon his lap as though the throne were merely a warm seat for the both of them. Oblivious to Rhodes's quiet dissatisfaction, Kai began to brush his fingers through the wolf's fur, petting him with absent care. Rhodes masked his jealousy as stern disapproval toward the dragon, yet said nothing. To ask for such a gesture himself felt unthinkable, presumptuous, even. Such a reward was not for a lowly being like him. Any action that might inconvenience the Supreme Lord, no matter how small, would be blasphemy against the very purpose for which he had been created. Despite the dissatisfaction he harbored toward the dragon, Rhodes didn't consider himself worthy to question his master's choices. He voiced no protest, for he knew that his master was too kind, his love knew no bounds. So, he remained silent while Kai continued to pat deicide, a faint smile playing on his lips as he enjoyed the feel of the wolf pup's fur. Memories of his adventures with deicide surfaced unbidden, pulling him down a familiar path in his mind, back to when the little one had been no more than a fragile egg, a mark of his achievement during beta days, along with his wooden club preserved inside a museum built by him and his friends. Finally, Kai raised his gaze to the other figure before him. Rhodes had still stood still, silent and composed, awaiting his master's command. Kai felt guilty at the sight, he had kept Rhodes waiting, drowned in his fun. Apologies, Rhodes, Kai said, his voice softer now. I was just lost in the memories of when this little guy was all but an egg. No, great master. Please do not insult this lowly servant by apologizing. I won't be able to look myself in the mirror. Rhodes's tone was low yet firm, carrying the weight of unshakable devotion. I and every member of Avalon live to serve you. Our very existence is to serve you, and die for you. And surely you might have been contemplating about the future, reminiscing about the old days. The words struck Kai speechless. Rhodes, realizing the potential weight of what he had just said, immediately bowed low. My apologies, great master, for speaking out of turn, he murmured, his head lowered almost to the floor. Kai rose from his throne, unwilling to let the conversation continue and possibly drift toward anything resembling Momonga's situation. Last thing he wished for was to make a joke out of his life, to live the life of a supreme one, burdened by the expectations of his subordinates. The things he had laughed at in his previous life could turn into his future. He definitely didn't wish to live that life. I'd better move before they start working on some 10,000-year plan, he thought dryly, lifting Deicide into his arms. He glanced around the throne room, then gave the wolf pup a small nudge before looking toward Rhodes. The sudden movement drew the NPC's full attention. Rhodes straightened instantly, his eyes fixed on his master, ready to act, to follow his command, whether that meant plunging the world to war or conquering the world, if necessary, all to fulfill his master's wishes. Since re-establishing communication in Avalon after the Supreme Lord's earlier outburst, Rhodes and the others had gathered intriguing reports from Albion, information gathered by the Knights of Avalon as they observed the lands surrounding the floating castle. Rhodes, there's been a change in our situation, Kai said quietly. Both Rhodes and Deicide turned their full attention toward him, keen eyes fixed on their master, unwilling to let a single word escape them. After Yggdrasil met its end, Kai continued, his tone measured, our guild base has been transported to a new world, and possibly to another universe. The servants of the Supreme Lord absorbed the words in silence before Rhodes spoke, his head inclining in acknowledgement. I understand, great master. So, what would you like for us to do? Neither of them questioned the fall of Yggdrasil nor the circumstances of their arrival here. To attempt to fathom the Supreme Lord's will was, in their eyes, an act of folly. It was peak foolishness to even try, and only a fool could ever hope to dream of such impossibility. In their hearts, the matter was clear, their presence in this new world was connected to their master's will. As no force in existence could move against their master, or think of such action, without their master's consent. Everything that ever happened, has happened, is happening, and will ever happen is all their master's design. His consent is what empowers any action or thought throughout existence and non-existence. Whether by his direct power or by forces allowed to act under his permission, Avalon's relocation could not have occurred without his will. For the Supreme Lord was, to them, beyond all mortal definitions, omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. A Supreme Lord, who defies any and all form of logic, reasoning, power and laws. He is the supreme existence in truest sense, above all supreme beings, a supreme entity, masquerading as a supreme one, residing amongst us lowly beings, blessing us with his presence. There is nothing that he can't accomplish, yet he grants us lowly beings the opportunity to serve him, and aids us in our growth, providing us with the guidance. Rhodes mused, as he admired his master's brilliance. Forever wishing to serve his master and live under his grace. Kai felt a flicker of doubt, as he felt something wrong from their conversation, as if he was missing a major puzzle. As his gaze shifted between his loyal NPC and the small wolf pup in his arms, but he pushed the thought aside. First things first. He needed to confirm their surroundings and whether this was indeed the same new world from Overlord or some entirely different world and verse. The timeline mattered too. Which point in the story am I standing in right now? The thought sharpened his focus as he began sketching out a rough sequence of actions. Basing his actions on Momonga's plan of action, to get things in motion faster. With deliberate flair, Kai extended his right arm wide, his left cradling Deicide close. Rhodes, he began, his voice carrying across the chamber, inform Alucard and Medea. They are to survey the surrounding lands, and check for nearby settlements. And if they find any, they are to approach with a friendly disposition. He paused. Remind them this is purely an information-gathering mission, and nothing more. And make it clear, if they encounter an opponent stronger than themselves, or even equal in strength, then they are to withdraw immediately. The same order applies to all within Avalon. Kai commanded. But, Master, Rhodes' voice carried a note of protest, almost a groan, at the thought of retreat. To him, the NPC's very existence was to serve and, if need be, die for their master. It was a great honor for them to be of any use to their master, to serve the purpose of their lives. Kai silenced him with a raised hand, the gesture brooking no argument. It is acceptable to retreat, he said, his tone soft but firm. Your lives hold more value than any task assigned to you or any action of your will, but there are exceptions to it, I am sure. Kai muttered, earning a nod from Rhodes, happy at being acknowledged by his master. Yet, Kai continued, but there is no need to experience death, live through it when you could just avoid the situation altogether. As you take on tasks, mistakes are bound to happen, and you might even experience failures, but owning to your mistakes and acknowledging your shortcoming will aid in your growth. Rhodes wished to argue but remained silent, acknowledging the love their master had for them. Yet his thought of serving the Supreme Lord persisted. While Kai concluded his speech, and that's how you grow and learn. Your lives hold meaning, and you all are very dear to me. It would pain my heart to see you throw away your life. This is our reality now, and not a game anymore. The pain felt would be real, and the trauma from death would be real. I've experienced it, I wouldn't wish to experience them again. Kai mused, while his NPCs were lost in a different world, their commitment to lay their life for their master strengthened, contrary to Kai's wishes. The words struck deeper than Rhodes had expected. His eyes welled with moisture, and with a swift motion he produced a handkerchief from his pocket to dab them away. Even Deicide's eyes shimmered faintly, betraying an uncharacteristic softness and joy. Understood, Great Master Morinidium Kai Telos, Rhodes said solemnly. Just Morse is enough, Kai murmured, tired of the conversation, his mentality drained from the antics of fate. If that is all, Great Master. Then I'll take my leave to get things started. Rhodes inclined his head in acceptance. Now that he had his orders, he turned to leave, already formulating the steps to see them carried out. Rhodes, Morse called after him, halting him mid-step, after giving Alucard and Medea their instructions, add Merlin to their party as well. His gaze turned thoughtful. Also, summon all NPCs of Avalon to Agartha. We'll have a meeting to bring every member of Avalon up to speed. Everyone should be prepared with reports on their respective floors. You will review these before presenting them to me at the meeting. It will be done, Great Master Morse, Rhodes replied, his tone steady once more. What time should I set for the gathering, Great Master? 10 hours from now, Morse answered. That should be sufficient for them to complete their surveys and prepare. Alcee, allot other members of Avalon to the task, have them assist floor guardians to smoothen up the process. Rhodes bowed again and began to depart, but Morse's voice stopped him once more. Before you return, go to the Key of Light and deliver my command to the Laplace demon. Tell him to survey this new world, cautiously. I expect whatever findings he can gather before the meeting begins. As you wish, Great Master, Rhodes intoned, lowering himself in a deep bow before turning on his heel to see the will of the Supreme Lord carried out. Happy at the opportunity the Supreme Lord had provided them with, despite already being aware about everything, he had let them all be useful, to serve their purpose. Though the talk about his outburst avoided, as both Rhodes and Deicide had imagined the situation resolved by the look of it, and by their conversation with their master. For their master had set aside his avatar to punish the insolent fool, who had angered their master. So, they didn't consider themselves worthy to question their master's decision. Chapter 40. Dragon's Soul. Chaos Sea, 9th floor. The Eternal Flying Castle of Utopia, Avalon. New World. Overlord verse. After Rhodes departed from the throne arena of the Chaos Sea, Morse slipped the guild ring onto his finger and cast teleportation spell, engraved in the ring. In the next instant, he reappeared in the outer gardens of Avalon. His arrival did not go unnoticed, the subtle shift in the air and mana signature alerted the floor's denizens. Morse paused, his attention caught by a sensation that was both familiar and unfamiliar. It was a new kind of awareness, the ability to detect the flow of mana and the presence of beings around him. It was a completely new territory for him, the world around him felt different and at the same time familiar. The new sensation of his body didn't feel different, as if he had been in his body for as long as he could remember. The mana and the presence of items, the world and the beings in his surroundings evoked a peculiar experience. Following the pull of that sensation, he lifted his gaze and saw an enormous white dragon descending through the night sky. A white western dragon descended from above, its size casting a long shadow over the gardens. Its scales were bright and metallic, almost like polished ivory with a faint silver sheen when the moonlight caught them. The wings moved in slow, deliberate beats, as it hovered above. The sheer size of the creature, and its aura could paralyze most with fear. Morse was mesmerized by the sight of a real-life dragon, though he had his hand behind the dragon's build and had seen it numerous times before in Yggdrasil. But now, it was their reality, and he was finally gazing at a dragon. Though, he He held a dragon in his arms, and was himself a part dragon. He carried dragon blood, from the world item he had used to turn into a dragon. But now the situation was different, he was looking at a dragon. In the past, he would have tensed up, frightened by its appearance during his time as a human, but now, it didn't matter to him. He was confident of overpowering the dragon, but he failed to find the source of this confidence of his. Perhaps it's my race, he thought. That, and the difference in stats. I am a world enemy for starters, there is no way any level 100 Joe can hope to defeat me. I possess 2 world enemies template, that should be enough to fight a large raid team of level 100 players. It was an intriguing realization, one that tugged at the edge of his curiosity. Still, how far has this affected me, and will this affect me majorly moving forward, twisting my persona completely? The dragon descended further, and landed on the floor before Morse. Retracting its wings with regal aura, the white dragon guardian of Avalon, Albion, lowered its head in great deference, bowing to the Supreme Lord, the Guild Master of the Vanitas Regnum Anta, and the Supreme Ruler of the Eternal Flying Garden of Utopia, Avalon. Greetings to the Supreme Lord, Morinidium Kai Telos, the great ruler of Albion began, greeting the ruler of Avalon with great reverence, but was stopped mid-sentence. It is good to see you too, Albion. While I appreciate the sentiment, I'm just out here on a stroll, Morse muttered, pausing to ponder. Albion and Deicide both looked at their master with great curiosity. Their innocent, almost childlike behavior brought a small smile to Morse's face as he glanced around at the outside world. The stars of this world blanketed the night sky, with a beautiful moon adorning the heavens. The stars appeared like scattered jewels, a sight that even left Morse momentarily mesmerized. Even during his first life, on Earth in the 21st century, he had never looked upon a night sky as beautiful as this. In that era, light pollution obscured much of the stars and their galaxy, while in the 22nd century, Earth's night sky was entirely concealed beneath dark smog, lingering nuclear radiation, and pollution. The sight reminding of the second episode of the anime, when Momonga had ventured outside, along with Demiurge, suddenly he felt the urge to fly into the outer space. Looking down at his guardians, his gaze shifted to the flanks of the Knights of Avalon, Sprite Knights, kneeling in formation and bowing to him, following Albion's lead. Similar to Albion, who had been gifted to Morse and his teammates upon their taking possession of Avalon, the Knights of Avalon were also given as guardians of the Avalon, though formally classified as pop monsters of the guild base. Turning his gaze back to Albion, Morse continued, Albion, you can address me as just Morse. I've already informed Rhodes about it, and I'm sure he will inform the others. As for the over-the-top welcome, I'm not here officially, I've just come out for a stroll. He paused, turning toward the Knights of Avalon before continuing. You can all get back to your posts. Don't worry about me, and act as if I'm not here. The Knights of Avalon, unlike other NPCs, lacked a sense of self and followed orders to the letter. Obeying his command, they returned to their posts, leaving Morse alone with Albion, while Deicide had hopped down and was now jumping around, exploring the gardens of Avalon. The sight of Deicide playing among the flowers, chasing a fairy, brought a smile to Morse's face, softening his expression as he relaxed, knowing he could finally take it easy. Despite the ups and downs he had experienced that day, and throughout his second life, he felt strangely calm. Albion remained silent, quietly admiring the affection their master held for them, his gaze lingering on the smile Morse wore while watching his pet at play. Pulling Albion from his musings, Morse spoke again. Look over the guild base, Albion. With the world item Yggdrasil leaf deployed, those without world items should be unable to enter the guild base. Along with the Tesseract code activated, it should remain peaceful, but keep updating me or the others in Agartha about the situation here. He muttered the last words as the white dragon nodded. Avalon already has the protection of a world item, with the base itself also being a world item. It's good that I got Kayaba to create me a Tesseract code, a fourth-dimensional cube, or at least it has an illusion of one. The cube should have turned the guild base invisible and partially transferred it to an unknown dimension, allowing any being passing through to enter one side of the barrier and exit on the other. Even players carrying world items can only spot the guild base after entering the vicinity of the dimensional tear created by the Tesseract cube. It's a great item, built using a caloric stone, a large number of wish upon a star, and a bribe, he mused, reminiscing about the past and feeling somewhat assured of the guild base's safety. Morse shook his head, pushing away distracting thoughts, and decided to speak about the reason for his visit. Albion had already received a rough report of the conversation between Rhodes and his master through those in Agartha, when Morse was busy instructing the Knights of Avalon to return to their posts. It now waited for its next course of action from its lord, the Supreme Lord. Morse flew at high speed on Albion's back. After he had expressed his wish to fly, Albion initially protested. Though they believed nothing in existence could truly harm their master, he was now walking the world as a Supreme One, and none knew better than the NPCs of the guild that, despite their overwhelming power, the Supreme Ones were not without vulnerabilities. They had grown up watching them and understood that, in certain circumstances, even the mightiest could fall prey against the universe. Their master would not resort to using his divine prowess simply because of an attack. To him, this was merely a body he had fashioned to dwell in the lower realm, far from his true abode. The last thing they wished for was their master returning to his realm and leaving them alone in this universe. After a long argument, Morse relented and allowed Albion to accompany him on his stroll. Albion increased his pace, teleporting great distances as he flew at record speed. Morse enjoyed the ride, with Deicide sitting comfortably in his lap. Having already tested his abilities in this world, he wasn't overly concerned, though he hoped it was indeed the new world of the Overlord verse, and not some other overpowered world or verse. Before long, the three of them had left the floating island of Avalon behind and emerged into the silence of outer space. The distant stars glittered in the outer space, and the moon loomed not far away. Morse took in the view with quiet admiration. Albion drifted through the silent outer space, carrying Morse and Deicide on his back. None of the three dragons required oxygen, which made their journey into space simple and without burden. Still, cautious as ever, Morse had cast less than perfect unknowable greater than over their small party before leaving Avalon. He couldn't let others sense them, during their ascent. Now, they hovered in the emptiness, quietly taking in the vast expanse before them. Morse lowered his gaze toward the planet below. A few large continents stretched across its surface, their shapes clear even from this height. One of them now housed his guild base. It's quite a sight, he thought. And the continent my base is on isn't even the largest in this world. As he observed the view, a faint tension ran through him. What was that? Gazing at the planet, Morse tensed up a bit. He wondered, looking around. It had been for a fraction of a second, but he had sensed an ominous presence. The presence felt familiar, as if his body recognized it. Yet, he failed to pinpoint the exact feeling of familiarity. Sensing the change in mood, Albion looked at his master, noticing him keenly staring at the ball of land they had arrived at. Master, Albion muttered cautiously, for he too had sensed the strange, ominous power. Noticing the caution in Albion's voice, Morse sighed. It might have been a false flag, a mere delusion on his part. Yet the ominous energy that felt familiar was not alone. Alongside it came another chaotic energy that sent a shiver down his spine. Morse shook his head, deciding to have it investigated. He could not allow a possible source of danger to remain unchecked, not when he knew nothing about it. He refused to stay in the dark, as it concerned both his safety and that of his NPCs. Pushing aside the thought for now, not wishing to worry his followers, he spoke. Even Deicide had noticed the shift in atmosphere, as well as the strange power emanating from a faraway continent, separate from their own. The presence was definitely as strong as a world enemy, he mumbled. All the while, he pondered about the other chaotic energy, that sent a chill down his spine. The presence of that power worried him, but he couldn't let his NPCs worry about his safety or make them paranoid by that presence. I am sure they are unaware about my actual power, after I used the fallen Dreki's heart. Giving them a bit assurance should ease their paranoia. He mused. Albion's great wings shifted slightly, his expression still heavy with unease. Deicide, too, remained quiet, the faint glimmer in its eyes betraying its own concern. When they both expressed their wish for Morse to return to the guild base and let the NPCs handle the matter, Morse only sighed. Morse mused. Riding on a high horse, he felt his inner Chunibyo rise. Though he had managed to keep it under wraps throughout his second life, now he struggled against his instincts. After all, only a Chunibyo could have created a guild like his. Observing the situation, he felt the need to assure his NPCs. Though he often felt embarrassed by this side of himself, he had still unleashed his Chunibyo during his guild creation, and when working on artifacts or weapons. But now, despite the chilling power he had sensed, he was a bit immersed in the situation. After all, he was finally in the new world. The moment brought back many memories from his first life, when he had first watched the Overlord anime and read both the light novel and the web novel. So, he found it hard to resist unleashing his Chunibyo once again. Morse sighed loudly, finishing his contemplation and setting aside his worries. He had come here to live, free from burdens and shackles, unwilling to constrain himself. The sound made the two dragons tense, for a moment fearing they might be abandoned. Yet to their amazement, their master spoke aloud, his voice carrying through the empty vacuum of space, defying logic by sheer force of presence. My dear children of Avalon, he murmured, drawing their full attention. Morse rose to his feet, his gaze fixed upon the distant stars as he continued. You see, there are mortals. There are immortals. As there are gods, demons, and dragons. He paused only to smile at them both before finishing. And then, there is me. Albion and Deicide lowered their heads in deep reverence, bowing before their master, the Supreme Lord. And as for how this charade of his might one day grow into a thorn, only time would tell. And I just wished to ask you guys for your opinion, regarding one of his skills. The Wrath skill of his, which he inherited from the Sovereign of Original Sin, where his stat gets 0.075x boost or 7.5% boost to his stat for every 1% of HP lost. Though, the skill doesn't feel extraordinary or special, but this is probably the strongest skill of his. As I haven't explicitly mentioned anything about it in detail, as I had not given it much thought, and considered the first case will be mentioned further in this AN while setting it up. But upon reading a comment at that part by Michael Kelly 1022, asking for the percentage increase, rather confirming if he was correct about the percentage he would receive at the end, before he reaches 0% of his HP. By the way, thank you Michael Kelly 1022, for pointing it out. So, here comes the problem. Case 1. Additive boost. In this case, the stat boost the mech receives is additive, or it is similar to simple interest, in layman terms. Here, the stat boost he receives, 7.5%, it is the interest are calculated based on the base stats of MC. While, the 7.5% is added, upon every 1% loss of HP. This was what I had planned, at least. From this method, MC will get 742.50% boost to his stats. Case 2. Compound boost. In this case, the stat boost is compounded. The 7.5% increment is calculated with respect to updated stats, bringing the final stats to astronomical values. He will get 28,558.42% increase to his stats. And with this stats, he should be able to destroy universes, much less galaxies or planets. At least compared to what the characters are shown to be able to do, with their respective stats. Also, the boost will not apply to the HP, and I am sure you can understand why. Now, we can make it as Kai's interference, where after inheriting the skills of the world enemy, he tweaked it to compounding boost, from the additive boost that the boss had. It will also make him powerful and at the same time, increase the difficulty of the boss battle he had. Adding to the lore, of only one or two party being able to clear the raid can change. Now, I am waiting for your feedback. What do you think is better, and what should I choose? And also, I've written a simple code to calculate the stat increase, and have pasted it in my reply to Michael Kelly 1022. So, you guys can check it out, by updating his stats. If you find any error in logic, you can reply in the comment, and I'll update the code. And this is this week's chapter upload. I've uploaded 5 chapters today, including this one. The next chapter will be probably released by next week. I can release them early, or by this day and time, next week. All of which depends on my schedule.